Have you ever wondered what truly gives the world its colours? Why the sky is blue, and why the ocean turns darker the deeper you go? Good evening, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. Take a moment to get comfortable, to ease your shoulders, and to let the busyness of the day settle in the background. This is a quiet space to unwind, and the pace from here on will stay soft and unhurried. Tonight, we are drifting slowly into the world of colour and the chemistry that quietly brings every shade to life. From the pale glow of early mornings to the deep blues that gather after sunset, every colour you see is shaped by tiny movements happening deep within the material of the world. It is a peaceful topic, gentle enough to follow as you relax. Before we settle into this colourful topic, I'm curious where you're watching from this evening. It is always interesting to imagine the many places these calm explorations reach. Cosy rooms, quiet corners, distant cities, and everything in between. If you enjoy these relaxed journeys into science, a like and a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. And to those already subscribed, thank you. Your support genuinely helps these bedtime explorations continue. If you would like to, tapping the notification bell will make sure you never miss the next gentle dive into curiosity. So take a slow breath, settle in, and let this quiet unfolding of chemistry and colour guide you toward rest. What if every shade you see is really light, reshaped by the tinier structures of the universe? Colour may seem simple at first glance, yet the path that creates it runs surprisingly deep. This journey begins with light, a soft stream of energy that arrives from the sun, passes through the sky, and meets the surfaces of the world. Only when that light touches matter does chemistry begin its quiet work, choosing which parts of the light are absorbed, which are reflected, and which are transformed into the colours you recognise. As we move through this exploration, the pacing will remain calm and steady. We will look at how plants use chemistry to colour leaves and flowers, why minerals carry vibrant blues and reds, how animals build or borrow their colours, and how the ocean and sky reveal theirs. From there, the story widens outward to planets and stars where chemistry and temperature give each world its unique palette, and inward, toward your own eyes and mind, where colour is interpreted, shaped and stored. Shade by shade, the world becomes a pattern woven from light and matter working together. The aim is not to overwhelm, but to offer a smooth, relaxing journey through something you experience every day yet may rarely think about: how colour exists at all. So let your breathing settle, let your thoughts loosen, and drift with this slow unfolding. What if every colour you have ever known began with nothing more than the smallest shift inside an atom? Light drifts through space in a way that feels almost weightless, carrying energy without ever needing a path to follow. It moves in steady waves, rising and falling so quickly and so quietly that the motions themselves become impossible to see. Yet within those tiny rises and falls, every colour you have ever known is hidden like a secret waiting to be revealed. When people talk about visible light, they're really talking about a narrow band of these waves, a small slice of something much larger. On one side lie waves so long and gentle that the eye cannot sense them. On the other side lie waves so short and intense that they pass by unnoticed. But in the middle rests a slim section where the wavelengths align with the sensitivities of the eye, forming a familiar spread of reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, and violets. It is such a tiny fraction of what light can be, and yet it holds every colour you have ever seen. What makes each colour different is simply the spacing between the rises and falls of the wave. Longer waves drift toward reds, Shorter ones lean toward blues and violets. But these waves are not colours on their own. Light can travel for millions of miles through empty space without showing a single shade. Colour appears only when light meets matter, when these waves interact with the atoms and molecules that make up the surfaces around you. You can imagine light almost as a quiet traveller passing through the universe, carrying within it all possible colours, yet showing none until something invites them out. It might touch the curved surface of a leaf, the fine grains of a stone, the smooth shell of an animal, or the shifting droplets of the sky. In each case, chemistry decides which parts of the light are kept, which parts are reflected away, and which are absorbed into the tiny structures inside matter. What remains becomes the colour you see. A beam of sunlight reaching a green leaf, for example, contains the full spread of visible wavelengths. But the leaf accepts certain pieces of that light and sends others back out. The chemistry inside the leaf absorbs much of the red and blue, leaving the greens to reflect softly toward your eyes. None of that colour belonged to the light alone, and none belonged to the leaf alone. It arose in the meeting point between them, where one offered energy and the other chose how to reshape it. This sharing of responsibility between light and matter is what makes colour so varied and so expressive. The same beam of light striking a rose petal becomes a warm red. The same light touching the surface of a clear sea becomes blue. And that very same light scattering through the air at sunset becomes orange or pink or gold. Light carries possibilities. Matter decides which ones to reveal. Even the rhythm of sunlight during the day changes how colour appears. Morning light tends to be softer, leaning gently toward warmer tones because of the angle at which it enters the atmosphere. Midday light becomes sharper, carrying a cleaner blend of wavelengths. Evening light stretches once more, favouring longer, warmer wavelengths before fading into darkness. The chemistry of the atmosphere interacts with this shifting light at every moment, scattering some wavelengths and allowing others to pass through. The colours you see at any hour are a quiet agreement between the sky and the sun. Thinking of light in this way can make the world feel more connected, as though colours are not fixed traits but relationships. The blue you see in a calm lake depends not only on the water, but also on the sky above it. The colours on an animal's wings depend not only on pigments in the feathers, but on the way light settles across their surface. Even the colour of an object indoors changes with the lamp that shines upon it, revealing different undertones under different lighting. In this gentle way, light becomes a bridge between the world and the eye. Without it, colour falls silent. With it, even the simplest object becomes expressive. A plain stone might reflect a narrow band of wavelengths that give it a soft grey appearance. A drop of dew may reflect the sky in miniature, carrying the colour of the air more than anything of its own. A golden field at sunset may appear warm not because the plants themselves changed, but because the light illuminating them shifted its balance of wavelengths. Yet for all the variation, colour always comes back to the same quiet exchange. Light offering a blend of possibilities, and matter choosing which ones to show. This is why colour feels both simple and mysterious. It is the everyday consequence of interactions far too small to see, happening billions of times each moment, yet it creates the entire visual palette of the world. As you think about the colours around you, it can be calming to realise that each one rises from this meeting between energy and structure. It is not a loud or forceful process. It is quiet, continuous, and everywhere. Light moves gently, matter responds quietly, and together they create a world where leaves look green, oceans look blue, Stones look red, and the sky glows with colours that shift as the day drifts on. In understanding this, you begin to see colour not as something objects have, but as something that arises from the soft meeting of light with matter. It is a partnership, a conversation, a steady unfolding that happens without sound or effort, shaping everything from the glow of morning to the fading hues of dusk. And all of it begins with light moving through space in gentle waves, carrying within it every colour the world could ever show. Atoms sit at the heart of everything you see, yet they're so small and so quiet that their influence is easy to overlook. Each one is a tiny structured system with a dense centre and light, fast-moving electrons arranged around it in delicate layers. These layers are not random. They follow patterns, almost like steps on a staircase so small it exists beyond sight. And it is within these steps that the very first hints of colour begin. When light reaches an atom, it does not always pass straight through. Sometimes a particular slice of that light fits perfectly with the distance between one electron's current step and the next one up. When that happens, the electron absorbs that precise piece of light and gently lifts itself to a higher position. It is not a violent leap, more like a quiet rise, the way a floating leaf might drift upward on a soft current of air. The part of the light that was absorbed disappears from what is reflected back outward. If an atom absorbs light from the red end of the spectrum, the red that arrived will no longer be there to reflect. What bounces back may then look green or blue or something in between. The colours we see on the surfaces of objects are, in a sense, the leftovers, the parts of the light that atoms and molecules did not keep for themselves. You can imagine electrons as careful listeners, responding only when a wavelength speaks in a pitch that matches the distance between their steps. Some atoms respond to very narrow ranges, absorbing just a few precise colours. Others respond to a slightly broader band. In every case, the pattern of layers inside the atom decides which parts of light are allowed in and which are reflected away. Because every element has its own arrangement of electrons, each one interacts with light in a slightly different way. Hydrogen responds to certain colours, sodium prefers different ones, copper, iron, neon, helium. Each one has its own quiet fingerprint, a set of wavelengths it absorbs and a set it lets pass. This is why some elements glow with distinctive colours when heated. It is why certain minerals have hues that feel instantly recognisable. It is why laboratory lamps containing different gases light up in different shades. The atomic structure gives each element a personality in light. These electron steps are spaced with extraordinary precision. Even a tiny shift in their spacing, something far too small to imagine, can change which colours an atom picks out from the light. Slight adjustments occur when atoms join together, when they are stretched or compressed inside a mineral lattice, or when they share electrons with neighbouring atoms. These tiny changes ripple outward into visible effects, turning a material slightly bluer, slightly redder, slightly brighter, or slightly duller. A single atom absorbing a single wavelength of light seems too small to matter, yet when it happens across trillions of atoms on a surface, the effect becomes the colour of an object large enough to hold in your hand. A patch of copper looks reddish because of the particular wavelengths copper atoms prefer to absorb. A piece of gold appears warm because its electrons allow more of the longer wavelengths to be reflected back. Iron absorbs a broad range, giving it deeper, more muted tones. These colours are not painted onto the materials, they rise from the atomic structure itself. When you think about colour in this way, it becomes clearer how delicate the process is. Light arrives carrying a blend of wavelengths. Atoms greet that light with their own internal arrangements. Some pieces of light match the spacing needed to raise an electron. Others do not. Some are kept, some are passed on. And the balance between those absorbed and those reflected becomes the color you see. Even temperature can alter this balance slightly. As atoms gain energy, their electrons vibrate more vigorously. The tiny shifts in spacing can influence which wavelengths are absorbed or released, which is why heated metals glow in different colors depending on how hot they are. Though these changes might seem dramatic at a distance, they arise from the same rules: electrons responding to light according to the structure within the atom. If you imagine zooming in far enough to watch this unfold, you would not see anything violent or chaotic. Instead, you might see electrons quietly rising and falling, accepting certain pieces of light like gentle steps upward and drifting back down when the energy is released again. This subtle ebb and flow happens all the time, across every surface, in every material. It is one of the quietest processes in nature, yet it builds the colors of the world. The predictability of these atomic patterns is what makes color analysis so powerful. Scientists can determine the composition of distant stars by observing which wavelengths of light disappear on their way to Earth. The dark lines in a star's spectrum reveal which atoms absorbed, which colors along the journey. It is the same process happening in everyday objects, simply placed on a scale large enough to study from across space. Every time you look at a colored object, you are seeing the result of countless atoms choosing which parts of the incoming light to keep and which to reflect. The bright red of a berry, the soft blue of a painted surface, the glow of a metal under a warm light. Each one is the outcome of electrons sitting in their arranged layers, following their quiet rules. All color begins with light, but atoms decide what to do with that light. Their internal structure, those tiny layered steps, shapes the world you perceive. And although you can never see the electrons themselves, the choices they make are visible everywhere you look. When atoms come together and form molecules, the world's colors become much more varied and much more interesting. A single atom has its own small set of electron steps and patterns, but when atoms link up, their electrons begin to share space. Instead of moving only around one center, they can spread out across several connected atoms. This shared movement creates new pathways that change the way the molecule responds to light. You can imagine each atom as a small room where electrons usually stay close to home. When atoms bond to form a molecule, doorways open between those rooms. Suddenly, the electrons are not limited to just one space. They can wander along corridors that stretch through several rooms at once. In chemistry, these extended regions, where electrons are shared and can move more freely, are often described as conjugated systems. In calmer language, they are simply stretches where electrons are allowed to roam. These roaming electrons are especially important for pigments. When light reaches a molecule with such extended pathways, certain wavelengths are just right for lifting these electrons from one roaming pattern to another. The energy of that light matches the difference between two allowed ways the electrons can move. The molecule accepts that particular piece of light, and the electrons gently shift into a new arrangement. The absorbed wavelengths disappear, and what remains, reflected or transmitted, becomes the visible color. The length and shape of these roaming regions helps decide which colors are absorbed. If the pathway is quite long, the electrons need less energy to be nudged into a new motion, so they tend to absorb longer wavelengths, leaning toward reds and oranges. If the pathway is shorter, the electrons need more energy, and the molecule absorbs shorter wavelengths, moving closer to blues and violets. The exact details can be complex, but the guiding idea is simple. The way electrons are allowed to move within a molecule determines which slices of light that molecule prefers to keep. This is why molecules are so powerful at creating colour. A single atom can only respond to light in certain narrow ways. A molecule, with its flexible shapes and shared electrons, can be tuned to interact with very specific parts of the visible spectrum. By changing the length of a chain, bending a ring, adding a side group, or altering the overall shape, nature and chemists can adjust a pigment's colour, shifting it from yellow to orange, from red to purple, or from blue to green. You see the results of this tuning everywhere. Chlorophyll, the pigment that colours leaves green, has a large ring structure with a central metal atom and extended electron pathways around it. These pathways are just right for absorbing much of the red and blue light that arrives from the sun. The leftover light, rich in green, is what reflects toward your eyes. Carotenoids, which give carrots, pumpkins, and many autumn leaves their yellow and orange tones, are long chains of linked carbon atoms with roaming electrons spread across the length of the molecule. The way these electrons move makes carotenoids absorb much of the blue and violet light, leaving warm colours to be reflected. Anthocyanins offer another beautiful example. These pigments are responsible for many of the reds, purples and blues found in berries, petals and some leaves. Their structure includes ring shapes, with electron pathways that respond sensitively to their surroundings. Small changes in the environment, such as the acidity or alkalinity of the sap or cell fluid, can shift the spacing of the allowed electron motions. This, in turn, changes which wavelengths the pigment absorbs. In more acidic conditions, anthocyanins often appear red. In more neutral settings, they drift toward purple. In slightly alkaline environments, they may appear blue. The same basic molecule can show different colours depending on the chemistry around it. This sensitivity is why some flowers can change colour as the soil conditions change, and why certain foods or plant extracts shift from red to blue when a kitchen ingredient alters their acidity. It is also why some pigments seem moody, bright in one context and dull in another. Their electron pathways are not fixed, they respond gently to the world around them. Not all pigments are so changeable. Some molecules hold their shapes firmly, and their electron pathways remain steady despite changes in their environment. These pigments produce stable, reliable colours. They are the ones that linger in old photographs, in well-preserved fabrics, or in artworks that have survived for centuries. Other pigments are more fragile, and the light that gives them colour can slowly cause them to break apart. When the molecule changes, the electron pathways change too, and the pigment no longer absorbs and reflects light in the same way. The result is fading, bleaching, or a shift to a duller tone. This is why strong, vibrant pigments feel different from softer, muted ones. A strong pigment has clear, well-defined pathways and absorbs tightly around specific wavelengths, producing a pure, intense colour. A muted pigment may absorb more gently, spread its absorption over a broader range, or reflect a mixture of wavelengths that blend into a softer shade. The difference between a bright, sharp red and a dusty, gentle rose tone often comes down to how precisely the electrons in the molecule interact with incoming light. In living systems, pigments have jobs far beyond decoration. Chlorophyll captures light energy to power photosynthesis, using its electron movements not just for colour, but of converting sunlight into chemical energy. Carotenoids can protect sensitive parts of cells from damage by intense light. Anthocyanins can act as sunscreen for leaves, shielding them from excess radiation, as well as attracting pollinators with their vivid hues. The colours you see in plants are a side effect of molecules doing very practical work. Animals also use organic pigments for important reasons. Some pigments help with camouflage, others with communication or display. The red of certain birds' feathers, the orange of a fish, or the yellow of an insect may come from carotenoids obtained from food, modified slightly by the animal's own chemistry. The underlying molecules are similar, but small changes in structure and in how the pigments are packed inside cells can produce noticeably different colours. The difference between strong and soft colours also depends on how many pigment molecules are present and how they are arranged. Densely packed pigments that all absorb the same way can create strong colour patches. More loosely arranged or mixed pigments create gentle, blended tones. In a flower petal, layers of different pigments can create gradients, edges, and subtle depth. In a leaf, overlapping chlorophyll and carotenoids can make greens that lean slightly more yellow or slightly more blue. Even outside biology, molecular pigments are everywhere. The inks in pens, the dyes in fabrics, the colours in paints and plastics all depend on synthetic molecules designed to have the right kind of electron pathways. Chemists adjust these pathways by changing the length of chains, adding rings, or attaching different groups to the core of the molecule. By doing so, they can create colours that nature rarely produces, from unusual shades of blue to vivid neon tones. The same principles that give a berry its colour also allow a highlighter pen to glow on a page. At the heart of all of this is the simple idea that combining atoms creates something more than the sum of its parts. When electrons are allowed to roam across a connected structure, they interact with light in richer, more complex ways. Each pigment you see is a carefully shaped pathway for electrons, tuned by evolution or by human design to respond to particular wavelengths. It can be strangely calming to think that the rich variety of colours in plants, animals and materials arises from these small repeated patterns. Chains and rings of atoms, electrons roaming through them, certain wavelengths accepted, others reflected. Quiet, predictable rules acting over and over again, building everything from the subtle blush of a petal to the deep green of a forest canopy. Molecules take the simple story of atoms and light and turn it into a vast, nuanced palette. They give the world the strong reds of ripe fruit, the gentle blues of distant petals, the soft yellows of drying grass, and the deep greens of summer leaves. All of that comes from electrons finding new paths to wander in structures just large enough to hold colour, yet still far too small to see. Minerals hold some of the most enduring colours on Earth, created not by delicate biological molecules, but by the arrangement of atoms locked in rigid, repeating structures. These crystalline frameworks give each mineral its shape, its strength, and more quietly its colour. At the centre of many mineral colours are metal ions, sitting in precise positions within the crystal lattice. The electrons in these metal ions respond to light in ways that create vivid greens, blues, reds, and purples, colours that can last for centuries without fading. Inside a crystal, the environment around a metal ion is very different from the open space it would have in a simple solution or as a free atom. The ions around it, tightly arranged in the lattice, create forces that split the electron pathways into slightly different levels. Light arriving at the mineral offers energy, and certain wavelengths match the small energy differences between these split pathways. When those wavelengths are absorbed, the missing colours shape the reflected colour we see. This is why two minerals with the same metal element can show different colours. The surrounding atoms alter the spacing of the electron levels just enough to change which wavelengths the mineral absorbs. The presence of trace impurities can shift a mineral's colour dramatically. A tiny amount of chromium can turn a dull mineral into a bright green. A slight addition of copper can produce shades of blue. Even vanishingly small amounts of iron can shift a gemstone toward red or yellow. These impurities substitute for other atoms in the lattice, changing the forces around certain metal ions, altering the spacing between electron levels and reshaping how the crystal interacts with light. It is one of nature's most delicate tricks. A few stray atoms out of millions can transform an entire stone. Some of the world's most admired pigments originated from these mineral colours. Malachite, with its rich green tones, forms from copper reacting with carbonates in water. Its banded structure, often seen in polished pieces, is the result of slow variations in the chemistry of the environment where it grew. Azurite, also a copper-based mineral, carries a deep, almost electric blue. Its structure differs just enough from malachite that the electron spacings shift, changing the wavelengths it absorbs. Lapis lazuli, treasured since ancient times, is built from a mixture of minerals, including lazurite, which gives it its distinctive ultramarine colour. Tiny traces of sulfur within its structure alter the electron pathways to produce that intense blue. Cinnabar, a red mineral containing mercury and sulfur, offers a striking contrast, reflecting brilliant reds that remain vivid even in small amounts. Each of these minerals forms under specific conditions, often deep underground where heat and pressure shape the final structure. Volcanic regions are particularly rich in colourful minerals. When hot fluids seep through cracks in the Earth's crust, they deposit metals along the way. As temperatures drop or chemical conditions change, crystals begin to form. The exact mix of elements, the speed of cooling, and the pressure in the surrounding rock all influence the final colour. Some minerals form in calm, slow-growing environments where large, well-defined crystals develop. Others form rapidly, creating smaller or more irregular structures but still holding complex colours. The shape and symmetry of the crystal lattice also play a role in colour. In some crystals, the arrangement of atoms creates pathways for light to move through the lattice. The light can be bent, split or scattered depending on the symmetry of the structure. This is why certain crystals show different colours when viewed from different angles. These optical effects are not caused by pigments, but by the way the crystal itself guides light. Even clear minerals can show flashes of colour when cut in certain ways, as the internal structure shifts the direction of passing light. The durability of mineral colours explains why they were treasured by ancient civilizations. Where plant-based pigments often faded, mineral pigments persisted. Early painters and artisans learned to grind malachite into powder, producing a soft green pigment that held its colour for centuries. Lapis lazuli was crushed and carefully washed to create ultramarine, a pigment so valuable that it was reserved for important artworks. Cinnabar, though containing mercury and therefore dangerous to handle, was ground into a red pigment used in murals, pottery and ceremonial objects. These pigments endured because the electron patterns within the minerals remained stable, resisting sunlight and chemical change. The process of creating pigments from minerals was slow and often painstaking. Stones had to be selected carefully, crushed with precision, and purified through repeated washing or sedimentation. The finest grains produced the richest colours. In some cultures, only specific workers with specialized knowledge were allowed to prepare these pigments. Their work connected geology to art, binding the colors hidden inside the earth to the surfaces of temples, manuscripts, and sculptures. Thinking about mineral colors in this way reveals just how much of the world's beauty comes from order and structure at tiny scales. The patterns of atoms inside malachite or azurite are fixed in place, repeating over and over, forming a lattice that shapes the way light is absorbed or reflected. It is a kind of internal architecture, invisible without special tools, yet responsible for colors that have caught human attention for thousands of years. Even today, minerals remain an important part of our understanding of color. Scientists studying distant planets look at the spectral fingerprints of minerals on their surfaces, using the same principles that explain the colors of stones on Earth. The ways in which metal ions absorb and reflect light can reveal the composition of a rocky world orbiting a distant star. A small shift in color, detectable in reflected light, can hint at the presence of iron, copper, chromium, or other elements. In everyday life, the colors of minerals often go unnoticed unless polished or cut. A rough stone may appear dull until light catches the crystal faces just right. Once polished, the structure becomes more visible and the colors deepen. The same chemical and structural rules that create the colors do not depend on human perception. They are always there, waiting for the right angle or the right light to reveal them. Mineral colors show how Earth's chemistry is both powerful and patient. Over long periods, water, heat, and pressure reshape the arrangement of atoms, building structures that interact with light in complex ways. These structures give rise to colors that can be soft or intense, muted or brilliant, steady or changing as the stone is turned. The Earth forms these minerals through processes that take years or centuries or far longer, yet the colors themselves are created in an instant each time light reaches them. The palette inside minerals is a reminder that color does not always come from biological processes. Sometimes it comes from the slow shaping of crystal structures underground, from metal ions held in place by forces too small to see, from impurities so sparse that they barely change the composition of the stone, yet shift its color completely. It is a quiet geological art form, created by chemistry and revealed by light. Plants create color in a way that feels almost effortless. Their leaves, petals, fruits, and stems are filled with pigments shaped by millions of years of evolution, each one tuned to the needs of the plant. These pigments do far more than decorate forests and gardens. They help manage sunlight, attract pollinators, signal ripeness, deter hungry animals, and protect delicate tissues from harsh conditions. And in doing so, they create much of the natural color we see every day. The most familiar pigment in plants is chlorophyll. It sits inside specialized structures where plants gather sunlight to power their growth. Chlorophyll is tuned to absorb the parts of sunlight that carry the most energy for photosynthesis, especially reds and blues. What remains, after chlorophyll has taken what it needs, is light rich in green. This reflected green, soft or bright depending on the leaf, is the color we associate most strongly with the plant world. Yet chlorophyll does not work alone. It is only one voice in a larger chemical choir. Alongside chlorophyll are the carotenoids, warm pigments responsible for yellows, oranges, and some kinds of gentle reds. Carotenoids are stable molecules with long electron pathways that reflect warm tones easily and consistently. In many leaves, they remain hidden beneath the stronger green of chlorophyll. Once the chlorophyll fades, the carotenoids step into the light, revealing the yellows and oranges that define autumn landscapes. These pigments are also common in fruits and flowers, where their colours attract animals, signal ripeness, or help draw in pollinators. Another family of pigments, the anthocyanins, add deep reds, purples and blues to plants. These molecules are versatile and sensitive to their surroundings, shifting colour depending on the acidity of the fluid within plant cells. In more acidic conditions, anthocyanins appear red. In more neutral settings, they drift toward purple. In slightly alkaline environments, they move toward blue. This is why certain flowers can take on different shades depending on the soil they grow in. It is also why some berries look almost black in one setting, yet show a reddish tone when held to the light. Flavonoids, a broader family of plant compounds, help create many lighter colours and subtle tones. They often work alongside other pigments, shaping the appearance of petals, young leaves, and fruit skins. Some flavonoids act as natural sunscreens, absorbing harmful ultraviolet light to protect delicate tissues. Others act as attractants for insects, reflecting colours that pollinators can see more easily than humans can. The colour changes seen in autumn are a combination of these pigments responding to the end of the growing season. As the days shorten and temperatures drop, plants begin to break down their chlorophyll. Without chlorophyll's strong green reflection, the colours underneath, the carotenoids, become visible. These warm pigments might have been present all summer, quietly supporting the plant in capturing and managing light. Once the green fades, the yellows and oranges appear suddenly, even though they were there all along. In some species, anthocyanins begin forming in the leaf near the end of the season. These pigments add reds and purples, often in patches or veins, creating the wide variety of autumn colours that sweep across landscapes. The browns that appear later in the season come from tannins, another group of plant compounds. As other pigments break down, tannins remain, producing the muted tones that mark the final stage before a leaf falls. This layering of pigments, each responding differently as the plant prepares for winter, creates the complex palette of the season: bright, warm, fading, and quiet, all at once. Colour in flowers serves yet another purpose. Many flowers use pigments to signal to pollinators, guiding them toward nectar or pollen. Bees, butterflies, and birds often see different parts of the light spectrum from humans, including ultraviolet light. Some petals contain patterns visible only in ultraviolet, creating markers that direct pollinators more efficiently. The colours we see are just one part of the picture. The plant's chemistry is tuned to communicate in multiple visual languages at once. In fruits, colour signals ripeness. A green fruit rich in chlorophyll but lacking in other pigments may taste bitter or unripe. As it matures, chlorophyll breaks down and new pigments form. Carotenoids may create yellows or oranges. Anthocyanins may produce reds and purples. These shifts not only attract animals but also indicate that the fruit's chemistry has changed. Sugars have formed, acids have softened, and seeds are ready to be spread. A fruit's colour is its quiet advertisement, telling the world that it is ready. Plants also use colour as protection. Darker pigments in leaves can act as shields, reducing damage from intense sunlight or cold. Anthocyanins, in particular, can protect young leaves that are still developing their chlorophyll systems. In these early stages, red or purple tones help the leaf manage incoming light without overheating or becoming damaged. As the leaf matures and fills with chlorophyll, the red or purple fades, giving way to green. Some of the most striking colour changes in plants come from pH-dependent shifts in pigment structure. The changing colour of hydrangea flowers, for example, arises not from the plant altering its pigments directly, but from changes in the soil that influence how the pigments behave. In soil rich in certain ions, the pH within the petal cells changes slightly, nudging the anthocyanins toward blue. In other soils they drift toward pink. The colour moving through the petals is a chemical response to the plant's environment, showing how sensitive these pigments can be. Plant colour is never static. It responds to light, temperature, soil, and the plant's own needs. This fluidity is what makes gardens and forests feel alive. Even within a single species, colour can vary from one environment to another. A flower that appears deep purple in one region may appear lighter in another. A leaf that turns orange in one climate may turn red or yellow in another. These changes reflect the plant's chemistry adjusting to the world around it. The pigments themselves are molecules shaped by evolution to help plants survive. They capture sunlight, protect tissues, attract partners in pollination, and communicate with animals. The colours we see are the result of these practical functions, yet they create our experience of beauty in nature. When you look at a field of wildflowers or a forest in autumn, you are seeing chemistry at work, each pigment performing its role, each colour emerging from the quiet interactions between molecules and light. These pigments take the complexity of plant life and translate it into something visible, a language of colour that tells stories about growth, health, readiness, and protection. Through chlorophyll, carotenoids, anthocyanins, flavonoids, and tannins, plants paint the natural world with a palette shaped by their needs and by the subtle dance between molecules and sunlight. Animals create their colours in ways that are both practical and surprisingly intricate. Unlike plants, which rely heavily on chlorophyll and carotenoids for the majority of their colours, animals use a mixture of pigments, structural effects, and inherited biochemical pathways to produce the patterns and shades that help them survive. Some colours signal danger, some help in blending into surroundings, others attract mates or intimidate rivals. Whatever the purpose, the chemistry behind these colours is often quiet, hidden inside cells, yet crucial to the lives of the creatures that carry them. One of the most widespread pigments in the animal kingdom is melanin. Melanin appears in several forms, each producing different tones ranging from soft yellows and rust browns to deep, rich blacks. What makes melanin remarkable is not only its colour but also its protective abilities. Melanin absorbs harmful ultraviolet radiation, helping animals avoid damage from intense sunlight. It strengthens hair, feathers, and skin, making them more resilient. It even plays a role in camouflage, allowing animals to blend into their environments more effectively. A black bird's glossy feathers, a leopard's dark spots, the subtle shading in a human eye, all of these depend on careful placement and concentration of melanin. Melanin forms inside specialized cells that package the pigment into tiny granules. These granules are then distributed through feathers, fur, scales, or skin, creating patterns through variations in density and location. The chemistry behind melanin is fairly similar across species, but the patterns it creates depend on evolution and the needs of the animal. A penguin's stark black and white contrast, for example, helps with hiding from predators both above and below while swimming. A desert lizard's sandy browns and muted tones help it disappear into its environment. Melanin is versatile, durable, and reliable, a pigment built for function, though it produces beauty along the way. Another pigment family seen in animals is the porphyrins. These pigments create delicate reds, pinks, greens, and sometimes purples in bird feathers. While less common than melanin, porphyrins can be surprisingly vivid. They form through chemical pathways related to those used in making hemoglobin, the pigment in blood. The resulting colours are often sensitive to light, breaking down when exposed to too much sunlight. This fragility is why certain bird species display bright porphyrin-based colours only in feathers sheltered from light, such as underwings. The colours can appear almost glowing when seen up close, though they may fade over time. Birds also make use of structural colour, but even before that topic appears later in the script, their pigments alone offer a wide palette. Turacos, for example, produce unique green and red pigments found nowhere else in the animal kingdom. These pigments derive from copper-containing molecules, giving their feathers deep emerald tones. The chemistry behind these colours is unusual compared to other birds, yet it shows how evolution can produce distinct pigments to match an animal's ecological niche. In reptiles, fish, amphibians, and some invertebrates, colour often arises from several layers of pigments and reflective structures working together. Reptiles such as chameleons have cells containing yellow, orange, and red pigments near the surface, layered above cells with reflective crystals that scatter light. By adjusting the spacing of these crystals, a chameleon can change the colour it reflects, creating shifts from greens to blues, and even to pale or dark shades. The pigments themselves stay the same. The animal simply rearranges the internal structure to alter how light reflects through the layers. Fish often rely on pigments such as carotenoids and pteridines, combined with reflective scales, to achieve their shimmering effects. Bright tropical fish gain their reds and oranges from carotenoids, which they cannot produce themselves. Instead, they borrow them from their diet. A fish feeding on algae or crustaceans rich in carotenoids will display vibrant colours. When the diet changes, so do the colours. This dependence on food-based pigments is common across many species. Flamingos, for example, are famously pink because of carotenoids in the small crustaceans they consume. Without those pigments, their natural colour would be a far more muted grey-white. Amphibians add another layer of complexity. Many frogs and salamanders produce pigments known as pteridines, which contribute to yellows and some greens. These pigments often combine with structural features to produce the final colour, blending chemistry and optical effects. The chemistry is rarely simple, but the goal is usually tied to survival, warning predators, competing for mates, or blending into surroundings. Some animals synthesize their own pigments, such as melanin or specific pteridines. Others borrow what they need from their food. Carotenoids are the most commonly stolen pigments, taken in through diet and deposited into skin, feathers, or scales. This connection between diet and colour is one reason why zookeepers sometimes adjust the diets of captive animals to maintain their natural colours. Without certain foods, the pigments would fade. Evolution shapes these pigments into patterns. A butterfly's wing may contain melanin arranged in dots, stripes, or wide patches to mimic leaves, bark, or eye spots. These patterns are controlled by chemical signals during development, guiding where pigment cells form and how they distribute their colours. The result can be a camouflage pattern that confuses predators or a bold display that warns them away. Butterflies also use structural colours, but their pigments lay the groundwork for many patterns seen across species. Mammals tend to rely on melanin more than other pigments. The browns of a deer, the black stripes of a tiger, the pale fur of an Arctic fox, these are all variations in melanin concentration. Even more subtle effects, such as the gradient in a horse's coat or the shading on a mouse's back, come from how melanin is deposited during hair growth. Mammals, for the most part, do not produce the vivid blues, greens or reds seen in birds or fish, though monkeys and some primates do develop bright skin tones that reflect health and vitality. Coral creatures add their own unique contribution to the animal colour palette. Many corals produce fluorescent pigments that glow under ultraviolet light. These pigments help protect the coral from excess sunlight in shallow waters, absorbing harmful wavelengths and releasing some of that energy as visible light. The glowing greens, yellows and reds seen in coral reefs are partly due to these pigments. They also enhance the appearance of the reef, creating one of the most colourful environments on Earth. Through all these examples, a pattern emerges. Animal colour is not a simple decoration. It is chemistry shaped by evolution, responding to the needs of each species. The pigments provide signals, warnings, attractions, and camouflage. Their colours reflect a balance between energy, light, diet, and inherited biochemical pathways. Every patch, stripe, shimmer, or glow is the outcome of pigments placed with intention, even if that intention arises slowly across generations. The animal kingdom's pigments remind us that colour in nature is never accidental. Whether created within the animal, borrowed from food, or combined with structural effects, these pigments give animals the ability to communicate, hide, attract, or protect. The chemistry behind them is often small and quiet, but the results shape the visual world in ways that are impossible to ignore. Some of the most striking colours in nature do not come from pigments at all. They arise from structure, from patterns so small and precise that they bend and scatter light in ways pigments could never achieve. These colours often appear brighter, deeper, or more luminous than anything produced by molecules alone. They shimmer, shift, and glow depending on the angle of the light and the position of the viewer, giving them a quality that feels almost alive. Structural colour works through microscopic architecture. Instead of absorbing certain wavelengths and reflecting others, as pigments do, these tiny structures manipulate the path of light itself. Light waves bounce between layers, reflect off ridges, or scatter through repeating patterns. When these reflections overlap in just the right way, certain wavelengths strengthen and others fade, creating colours that appear pure and vivid. It is a quiet optical arrangement, built from shapes rather than chemical bonds. One of the easiest ways to picture structural colour is to imagine light as a gentle ripple moving across water. If the surface of the water is smooth, the ripple travels evenly. If the water is covered in tiny steps or ridges, the ripple breaks, overlaps, or shifts. The same happens with light on a microscopic scale. When light meets an ultra-fine pattern, something far smaller than the width of a human hair, its waves interact, creating the shimmering blues and greens found in many animals. Butterflies are one of the most familiar examples. Their wings are covered in tiny scales, and the surfaces of those scales contain fine ridges arranged in layers. These ridges are spaced so precisely that they reflect specific wavelengths of light. The blues seen on a morpho butterfly are not made from blue pigments. They are made from repeated structures that bounce light in ways that reinforce blue wavelengths and cancel out others. The result is a blue so vivid that it seems to glow. When the butterfly moves, the angle of the reflected light changes, and the colour appears to shimmer or ripple. Bird feathers use similar principles. Many birds, especially those with brilliant blues and greens, owe their colours to microscopic structures inside their feather barbules. These structures act like layers of transparent material laid in careful stacks. Light entering the feather reflects between these layers, and depending on the spacing, certain wavelengths emerge stronger. This is why a blue jay remains blue even though there is no blue pigment in its feathers. The colour comes entirely from structure. If you were to crush a blue feather into dust, the colour would vanish because you would destroy the structure that produced it. Beetles also rely heavily on structural colour. Their shells contain layers of chitin arranged into repeating patterns, often forming spirals, lattices, or stacked plates. These structures create metallic greens, golds, and iridescent blues. When light hits them, it travels through surfaces that behave like miniature mirrors and prisms. This interaction produces colours that shift as the beetle moves, turning a single shade into a gradient of shimmering tones. Some beetles display colours that appear almost metallic, yet contain no metal at all. The illusion comes purely from the way light is bent. One of the most remarkable properties of structural colour is that it does not fade easily. Pigments can break down with time, light, and air, but structures remain stable as long as the underlying material stays intact. A feather kept in darkness for many years can still reveal a brilliant blue when brought back into the light, because the microscopic patterns are unchanged. Ancient beetle shells, preserved for centuries, can still show flashes of iridescence for the same reason. Structural colour is built from shape rather than chemistry, making it far more resistant to fading. Pigment-based colour depends on molecules absorbing specific wavelengths. If those molecules break, the colour changes. Structural colour depends on the physical arrangement of tiny layers, ridges, or repeating patterns. If that architecture stays intact, the colour remains. Pigments can produce subtle, warm hues, while structural colours tend to produce brighter, more saturated shades. Pigments absorb. Structures reflect and enhance. Both play important roles in nature, but the effects are very different. Pure blue is one of the rarest pigment colours in the natural world. Few molecules reflect blue strongly, and many that seem blue are actually mixtures of wavelengths that approximate it. Structural colour solves this problem by using patterns to select blue wavelengths directly. This is why many of the most striking blues in nature come from structural effects. The scales on a morpho butterfly or the feathers of a blue jay can reflect a blue so intense that pigments cannot match it. The colour feels cleaner, brighter, and almost luminous. Some structural colours even combine with pigments to produce complex effects. A butterfly wing might contain a thin layer of melanin underneath the structural elements. The melanin absorbs stray wavelengths, making the structural colour appear sharper. Many birds use similar combinations, layering pigment and structure to create a deeper, richer tone. Structural colour is not limited to animals. It appears in certain minerals, shells, and even plants. The iridescent sheen on some seashells comes from layers of calcium carbonate arranged in fine sheets, bending light as it passes through. The metallic glimmer of some minerals comes from repeating atomic structures that scatter light in predictable ways. Even certain fruits, such as the bright blue berries of the pollia plant, use structural colour to achieve shades far more intense than any pigment could produce. These berries remain vibrant for years, even after they dry out, because their colour comes entirely from structure. The way structural colour works can feel almost magical, yet beneath the shimmer and glow it follows simple principles. Light enters a pattern. The pattern bends the light. The bending reinforces certain wavelengths. those wavelengths become the color your eyes perceive. It is a quiet, physical process, repeated billions of times across the surfaces of wings, feathers, shells, and leaves. Thinking about color in this way reveals how much nature relies on structure. Pigments provide the warm browns, reds, yellows, and greens that fill the world. But when nature wants to create something radiant, something that shifts with movement or glows with purity, it turns to structure. It builds tiny landscapes that guide light, weaving brightness into surfaces one microscopic ridge at a time. Structural color teaches that beauty does not always come from chemical complexity. Sometimes it comes from arrangement, from tiny shapes lined up so precisely that light has no choice but to dance. Water changes the rules of color. As soon as light enters the ocean, the colors that seemed so bright at the surface begin to soften and disappear. Water absorbs light unevenly, allowing some wavelengths to travel deeper while stopping others almost immediately. Reds and oranges are the first to fade. Within only a short distance below the surface, these warm colors are swallowed by the surrounding water, leaving the cooler blues to dominate. Even yellows begin to dim as depth increases. By the time you are several body lengths down, the world has shifted to blues and greens, glowing softly from the sunlight filtering above. This selective absorption shapes every color you see underwater. A bright red fish near the surface remains red, but as it swims deeper, its color appears darker and darker until it turns almost black. The fish has not changed, but the light reaching it has. Without red wavelengths available to reflect, its natural pigments cannot show themselves. This effect is so strong that many deep-sea animals have evolved red pigmentation as a form of camouflage. In the upper world, red stands out boldly. In the deep ocean, where red light cannot reach, red becomes invisible. A red shrimp drifting hundreds of meters below the surface is effectively black to any creature looking for a meal. As you descend further, even blues begin to fade. Light thins. Colors vanish one by one until only muted tones remain. The world becomes dim, then shadowed, then almost entirely dark. Yet life continues in this twilight zone, and many species have adapted in remarkable ways. Some create their own light through bioluminescence, a chemical process that allows organisms to glow in the dark. Instead of relying on reflected sunlight, they generate light through reactions involving oxygen and specialized molecules. These glowing creatures produce a range of gentle blues and greens, the colors that travel farthest in water. Many use this light for communication, attracting partners or signaling danger. Some use it to confuse predators, flashing patterns that disrupt vision. Others use a faint downward-facing glow to erase their shadow, blending into the faint light above. The chemistry behind these glimmers is elegant and efficient. A molecule holds a small store of energy. When it reacts with oxygen, the energy is released as light instead of heat. It is a quiet process, soft and controlled, perfect for the stillness of deep water. Not all underwater color comes from bioluminescence. In the sunlit shallows, algae and coral reefs show a far broader palette. Algae contain pigments that help them capture light for photosynthesis, similar to the way plants do on land. Greens are common, but reds, browns, and even purples appear depending on the species and the depth. Red algae often thrive in deeper waters within the sunlit zone because their pigments capture the wavelengths that remain available. Brown algae rely on pigments that help them gather light even when competition or water movement reduces brightness. Coral reefs display colors that come from a combination of chemistry and biology. The corals themselves contain pigments that protect their tissues from intense sunlight in shallow waters. These pigments often appear brown or golden. The vibrant blues, greens and pinks seen in many corals come from symbiotic algae living inside their tissues. These algae carry their own pigments, providing energy to the coral while creating a glowing appearance in the process. Some corals also contain fluorescent pigments that absorb incoming light and re-emit it in a new colour. Under strong sunlight, this fluorescence can give reefs an almost luminous quality. As you move from shallow water to deeper regions, the colours change smoothly. Near the surface, light creates bright patches of gold, green and turquoise. A little deeper, the warm tones fade and only cool colours remain. Below that, greens dim to dark blue, and blue dissolves into shadow. There is a moment, somewhere between these layers, when the last hint of colour gives way to an indistinct grey-blue. After that, the world becomes monochrome. It is a natural gradient from colour to absence, shaped by how water filters the spectrum. The animals living at different depths align their pigments with their surroundings. In the sunlit zone, fish often carry bright colours for courtship or territorial display. Their pigments work well because the full spectrum is still available. In dimmer waters, many animals become silver or reflective, blending into the ambient light. Reflective scales scatter whatever light reaches them, helping them hide in a world where brightness is limited. In deeper regions, red and black pigments dominate because they hide the animal completely. An animal that looks bright red at the surface becomes invisible in the deep. The chemistry of underwater colour is not just about pigments, but about which wavelengths survive the journey through water. Even a few meters can transform the appearance of a scene. A coral reef photographed with natural light appears cool and blue-green. With a flash that restores the missing wavelengths, the reds and oranges return vividly. This is why underwater cameras often use filters or lights, not to add colour but to restore what the water removed. Bioluminescence adds a strange magical element to the deep. A comb jelly drifting slowly can trail a soft shimmer behind it. A small fish startled by a predator might release a burst of glowing particles, a momentary cloud of light designed to confuse. Some deep-sea squid have organs that produce light in patterns that mimic the faint brightness of the surface above, making them nearly invisible from below. These displays rely on chemical reactions that evolve to work efficiently in cold, high-pressure environments. Every glow is a transformation of chemical energy into light, a quiet signature of life where sunlight never reaches. As depth increases further, the colours that once defined the upper ocean become distant memories. There is no red, no orange, no yellow. Even blue becomes faint and scattered. What remains is a world shaped by chemistry and quiet, punctuated by flashes of bioluminescence or the reflective gleam of scales catching the smallest hint of light. The absence of colour becomes its own kind of presence, a reminder that colour always depends on the conditions where light and matter meet. Descending through the ocean is like watching the visible spectrum gently fold itself away. Each layer removes a little more of the world's brightness, until only light created by living things remains. Still, the chemistry that shapes these colours continues. Pigments in algae catch what light they can. Corals use fluorescent molecules to glow. Deep-sea creatures rely on red and black to hide, or on bioluminescent reactions to communicate. Water narrows the palette, but life always finds a way to use colour, even when the ocean tries to take it away. By the time you reach the deepest places, almost no natural colour survives. The water above has taken every wavelength, except the faintest blue. Yet even in this darkness, the principles that shape colour still hold. Light, matter, and chemistry continue their quiet interactions. The palette simply becomes softer, quieter, and more selective, shaped by the deep calm of the ocean itself. The colours of the sky emerge from ordinary sunlight meeting the thin, shifting layers of air around Earth. Even though sunlight looks white to the eye, it carries a blend of all visible wavelengths. When this light enters the atmosphere, it does not travel untouched. It meets molecules of nitrogen and oxygen, tiny particles of dust, droplets of moisture, and crystals of ice. Each encounter bends or scatters the light differently, separating the colours gently and sending them in new directions. The sky's palette is shaped not by pigments, but by the way light is redirected by the air itself. The familiar blue of a clear midday sky is a result of scattering. When sunlight enters the atmosphere, the shorter wavelengths, the blues and violets, are scattered much more easily than the longer reds and oranges. The air molecules act like tiny obstacles, gently nudging the shorter waves sideways in every direction. Because the eye is less sensitive to violet, and because some violet light is absorbed higher in the atmosphere, the sky takes on a blue tone instead of violet. It is a surprisingly delicate process, built from trillions upon trillions of tiny interactions, each one bending a small piece of sunlight. The cumulative effect creates a dome of soft blue overhead. Though the sky looks blue during the day, the colour changes as the sun moves. At sunrise and sunset, sunlight must pass through a much thicker layer of air before it reaches the observer. Along this longer path, more of the short wavelengths are scattered away, leaving the longer wavelengths, the warm reds, oranges and golds, to dominate. This is why a sunrise can feel gentle and pale, while a sunset often glows with deeper, richer tones. The light has been sifted by the atmosphere, leaving behind a warm mixture that paints the sky and clouds. Dust, aerosols and humidity can enhance or soften these colours. Dust particles from deserts or volcanic eruptions scatter light differently, often enhancing reds and purples at sunrise and sunset. Aerosols from natural sources or human activity can make the colours appear hazy or muted. Water droplets in humid air scatter more light overall, often producing pastel tones. Even a thin veil of high-altitude ice crystals can reshape the sky's colours, producing halos or shifting the light into gentle glows. Rainbows form when sunlight enters a raindrop, slows down, bends, reflects off the inside surface, and bends again as it exits. Each wavelength bends at a slightly different angle, separating the colours into a soft arc. A rainbow is not a physical object in the sky, but a pattern created when light interacts with water droplets at just the right angle. No two observers see exactly the same rainbow, because each person views a unique arrangement of raindrops reflecting light toward their eyes. Halos and sun dogs arise from light interacting with ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. These crystals often take the form of tiny hexagonal plates or columns. When sunlight passes through them, the light is refracted at specific angles, creating rings or bright patches of light around the sun. Halos appear as pale, glowing circles, sometimes accompanied by arcs or additional bands. Sundogs appear as two bright spots, one on either side of the sun, often showing hints of red on the side closest to the sun and blue farther out. Like rainbows, they depend on geometry. The angle of the light, the orientation of the crystals, and the viewer's position all shape the colours that appear. Humidity plays a role in subtler ways. When moisture is present, small droplets can form in the air, scattering light more evenly and producing a whitish haze. During very humid days, the ski may look pale or washed out because the light is scattered broadly before it reaches the ground. After rain, when the air is clearer and free of dust, the sky often appears a deeper blue. The chemistry and physical behavior of the air is always shifting, and these shifts change how light travels through it. Clouds add their own influence to the sky's colors. They scatter all wavelengths roughly equally, which is why clouds appear white in bright sunlight. When sunlight is low on the horizon, clouds catch the warm light that has passed through the thick atmosphere, reflecting reds, oranges and pinks across their surfaces. High clouds composed of ice crystals can take on pastel colors like peach, lavender, and pale gold. The colors across the sky at dusk are often the combined effect of scattering in the air and reflection from the clouds. The deepening blue seen at higher altitudes or in clear mountain air comes from the same scattering effect. With fewer particles to interfere and less moisture to dilute the light, the sky appears cleaner and more saturated. Astronauts orbiting the Earth describe the sky as transitioning sharply from deep blue to black because there is almost no air to scatter the light. The color depends entirely on how much atmosphere lies between the observer and space. Light can also be polarized by scattering. This means the light waves vibrate more strongly in certain directions. Birds, insects, and some other animals can detect these subtle patterns, using them for navigation. Though humans cannot see polarized patterns directly, polarized lenses reveal them, showing how widespread the scattering effects truly are. The colors of the sky are constantly changing because the atmosphere itself is always in motion. Dust levels rise and fall, humidity shifts, sunlight angles change, wind carries particles from one region to another, and clouds rearrange the light. Each moment offers a slightly different version of the same fundamental interactions. The palette never stays exactly the same. When looking up at a clear sky, it can be soothing to remember that its color is created by countless gentle redirections of sunlight. There is nothing painted or fixed about it. It is an ongoing process shaped by chemistry, physics, and the movement of air. Even the simplest blue sky demonstrates how sensitive light is to its surroundings, responding to particles so small they cannot be seen individually. The sky's colors, from the bright midday blue to the deep reds of sunset, come from interactions that happen quietly and continuously. Light enters the air, is scattered or bent, and arrives at the eye in a blend shaped by the journey it has taken. The atmosphere acts as a vast transparent filter, redistributing wavelengths with each moment. The result is a living canvas that shifts with time and weather, offering gentle, ever-changing displays shaped by the chemistry of the air. When temperature rises, colour begins to appear in ways that feel both familiar and quietly remarkable. Heat gives atoms and molecules extra energy. As they warm, they begin to move and vibrate with greater intensity. At a certain point, they carry so much energy that they start to emit light. This gentle glow is called incandescence, and it follows a predictable pattern. A warm object may first show a faint red shimmer, then deepen toward orange as it grows hotter, and eventually shift into a bright white when the temperature becomes extremely high. The colors are not added from outside, but emerge naturally from the energy the object releases. You can see this progression in many everyday situations. A metal rod heated in a fire will first show a dull red before brightening to orange as the temperature climbs. A candle flame glows softly because the heated gases emit a warm mixture of yellows and oranges. Embers in a fireplace glow red where the wood is cooling and brighter orange where it remains hottest. Even the coil inside an electric heater follows the same pattern. These colours are tied to temperature, offering a quiet and steady way to read the heat of an object without touching it. Stars follow the same rules. A cool star glows red because it emits more long wavelengths and fewer short ones. A warmer star appears orange or yellow. A very hot star glows white or even faintly blue because the heat causes it to emit stronger short wavelengths. The Sun itself appears white from space but looks yellow from Earth because the atmosphere scatters some of the shorter wavelengths. Across the universe, temperature shapes colour wherever matter becomes hot enough to glow. Heat produces colour in another way as well, especially in flames. When certain materials burn, the metal ions inside them absorb energy from the flame and lift their electrons to higher positions. When the electrons release that energy, they emit light of specific colours. This is why salts can create colourful flames. Sodium salts produce a bright yellow. Potassium creates a pale violet. Copper compounds offer blues and greens. Strontium yields a deep red, while calcium creates orange. The colours come from electron transitions rather than heat alone. Each element has its own set of wavelengths it prefers to release, and the flame carries these colours outward. This quiet chemistry lies behind many of the colours in fireworks. Although fireworks often carry dramatic associations, their chemistry is no different from a salt flame observed in a calm laboratory. Different metal salts are heated until their electrons move and release energy as light. Copper salts create blue sparks, barium produces greens, strontium creates deep reds, sodium gives yellows, though it is often avoided because it can overwhelm other colours. Even though fireworks explode, the colours themselves arise from the same gentle electron movements found in a candle flame or a burning log. The drama is in the motion, not in the chemistry. The glow of embers is another example of temperature-driven colour. Embers do not burn with open flames. Instead, they remain hot because the chemical reactions continue slowly inside the porous structure of the wood or charcoal. This steady heat produces a soft red glow where the temperature is lower and bright orange where it remains high. The light is gentle and calming, created as the heat slowly escapes from the surface as long wavelengths of light. Embers seem to pulse or breathe as the temperature shifts and the air around them moves, but the colouring is governed by the same physics as glowing metal or heated stars. Even candle flames have layers shaped by temperature. The base of the flame, where vaporized wax first heats up, glows blue because the temperature there is highest, and the light emitted has a stronger short wavelength component. The middle of the flame glows yellow and orange because tiny glowing particles formed from incomplete combustion emit warm colours as they release heat. The outer edge, where the flame meets cooler air, becomes softer and more transparent. The shape and colour of a candle flame are controlled by temperature gradients, chemistry, and the movement of rising gases. The colours of hot metals follow predictable patterns as well. Blacksmiths have long understood the connection between colour and temperature, using it to gauge the readiness of iron or steel. A faint red glow marks the beginning of the heating process. As the temperature rises, the metal shifts toward a brighter orange, eventually appearing nearly white when extremely hot. Though the blacksmith may have learned these colours through experience, the underlying reason remains the same. Hotter matter releases light of shorter wavelengths, creating a brighter and whiter glow. Across all of these examples, heat produces colour by giving atoms and molecules enough energy to emit light directly. The hotter the object, the shorter and more varied the wavelengths it emits. At low temperatures, only the longest wavelengths become visible, so the glow appears red. As temperature increases, more of the visible spectrum joins in, moving toward orange, yellow, and white. At the highest temperatures, light extends into blue and even ultraviolet, though the latter cannot be seen by the human eye. The pattern is smooth and predictable, making colour a quiet indicator of energy. When flame chemistry and incandescence combine, the result can be especially rich. The base of a fire may glow blue from hot gases, while pieces of wood or charcoal glow red or orange from steady heat. Sparks drifting upward may carry colours from metals in the wood or minerals in the soil. Each colour tells a slightly different story about the temperature and chemistry shaping it. Understanding temperature-driven colour can make everyday scenes feel more connected. The warm glow of a lamp filament follows the same rules as a distant star. The colours in a fireplace arise from the same physics that colours the surface of planets. A small kitchen flame contains the same principles that guide the shimmering heat of molten rock deep beneath Earth's crust. No matter the scale, heat nudges atoms into movements that produce light, revealing their energy in the language of colour. Firelight, starlight, candlelight, and glowing metal all share this gentle physics. Temperature shapes the spectrum, creating a gradient from red to white that appears wherever matter is heated. The colours themselves are not forced but emerge naturally as energy flows outward. It is one of the oldest forms of visible colour in the universe, present in stars long before pigments evolved on Earth. And even in the simplest flame, the same rules continue, connecting everyday warmth to cosmic fire. Metals create colour in a way that feels different from almost everything else. Instead of relying on pigments or molecular structures to absorb and reflect specific wavelengths, metals use their electrons in a much freer, more fluid way. These loosely held electrons move easily across the surface of the metal, almost like a quiet tide that shifts and flows wherever light touches. Because of this, light does not sink into a metal the way it does into most materials. Instead, it reflects strongly, producing the unmistakable shine that makes metals appear polished even when lightly worn. This ability to reflect light comes from how the electrons in a metal behave. In most materials, electrons are tied tightly to individual atoms or specific bonds. In metals, many of the electrons are not bound in this way. They drift throughout the structure, forming what chemists often describe as a sea of electrons. For a gentle image, you can imagine them as a calm pool that spreads across the entire metal, responding instantly to incoming light. When light waves arrive, the electrons shift together, vibrating as a collective. They respond so quickly and efficiently that the light is sent back outward, producing the bright mirror-like surface we associate with metals. Because metals reflect such a broad range of wavelengths, they often appear silvery or white. Silver is an excellent example. Its electrons reflect almost all visible wavelengths evenly, which gives silver its bright, almost crisp appearance. It shines because very little of the incoming light is absorbed. Gold and copper, however, behave a little differently. They both absorb a small portion of the spectrum, shaping the colours that remain. In gold, the electrons absorb blue wavelengths slightly more than others. As a result, the reflected light is richer in yellows and reds, creating the warm glow unique to gold. Copper absorbs a bit more of the green and blue region, leaving the reflected light dominated by reds and oranges. The colours of metals are not pigments, but the subtle balance of absorbed and reflected wavelengths shaped by their electron behaviour. The smooth, reflective appearance of metals becomes even more striking when they are polished. Polishing removes tiny irregularities from the surface so light can reflect cleanly. When a surface is rough, light scatters in many directions. When it is smooth, the light bounces off in a single, predictable direction, much like a mirror. This is why even a simple piece of metal can look dramatically different, depending on whether it has been left rough or polished to a sheen. The metal's internal chemistry remains the same, but the way its surface interacts with light changes the overall appearance. Metallic colour also stands apart because metals do not rely on selective absorption to create most of their colours. Pigments, dyes, and natural materials absorb specific wavelengths and reflect others, creating distinct hues. Metals, by contrast, reflect nearly everything with great intensity. Their colour often comes from the small portion of light that is not reflected, rather than the portion that is. This means metals tend to blur colours around them. A piece of silver may seem to take on the colours of its surroundings, because its reflective surface shows whatever light falls upon it. Gold and copper also reflect their environment, though the warm tint of their absorption patterns adds a distinctive tone. The behaviour of metals becomes even more interesting when placed in different conditions. Thin films of metal, for instance, can produce a range of colours, because extremely thin layers cause light to reflect in overlapping waves. These overlapping waves reinforce some wavelengths and cancel others, creating a soft spectrum of colours that appears different depending on angle and thickness. This effect, while not as common as the reflectivity of bulk metal, shows how even tiny variations in structure can influence colour when dealing with metals. In jewellery, coins, and decorative objects, the colours of metals have played important roles for centuries. The warm glow of gold has been treasured across cultures, its colour linked to both its rarity and its distinctive electron behaviour. Copper has been used for tools and ornamentation, its reddish tone giving it a familiar warmth. Silver, with its bright, nearly perfect reflection of visible light, has long been associated with clarity and purity. These associations arise from the natural colours metals produce when interacting with light. Metals behave differently from pigments because of how the electrons respond collectively. When a light wave strikes a pigment, only certain electrons respond, absorbing specific wavelengths. When light strikes a metal, almost all the surface electrons respond together, moving in synchrony. This movement sends most of the light away, giving metals their brightness. The richness of metallic colour therefore depends on reflection rather than absorption, making the appearance of metals tied more to surface and environment than to the internal structure alone. Because of this, even small changes in alloy composition can alter the colour. Adding small amounts of other elements to gold can shift its tone. A mixture of gold and copper produces rose gold, with a warm pinkish hue. Adding silver to gold can produce a paler, softer yellow. In each case, the added elements influence how the sea of electrons responds to light, subtly adjusting the balance of wavelengths reflected. Metals also remain striking because their colours tend to withstand the passage of time. While pigments can fade or break down, metals maintain their reflectivity unless tarnished or oxidized. Oxidation forms a surface layer that interacts differently with light, sometimes producing new colours. Copper, for example, forms a green patina as it oxidizes, a colour that arises from the new compounds on its surface rather than the metal beneath. Silver tarnishes as it reacts with sulfur in the air, forming a darker layer. Yet beneath these coatings, the original reflective properties remain. Viewing metal color through its electron behavior reveals that shine is not just a surface effect. It is a direct result of how the electrons inside the metal move and respond. This is why metals appear bright even in low light. They need only a small amount of incoming energy to send light outward again. Their colors are not imposed but emerge naturally from the structure and movement of electrons across the metal's surface. Metals glow, shine, and reflect because they blur the boundaries between light and matter. Their electrons form a kind of shared space that welcomes incoming light, responds instantly, and sends it away again with little intervention. Through this simple yet elegant process, metals create colors that are smooth, warm, and enduring, a different kind of color shaped by the quiet movement of electrons, polished by nature and refined by time. Human skin carries its colors through a surprisingly layered blend of chemistry, structure, and light. Every tone, from the palest to the deepest, emerges from just a few molecular players arranged in different amounts and different layers. The result is a surface that reflects, absorbs, and scatters light in ways that shift gently, depending on health, temperature, sunlight, and even emotion. Although skin color can appear simple at first glance, it is shaped by an elegant combination of biology and physics working quietly beneath the surface. The primary pigment involved is melanin, produced inside specialized cells located near the base of the outer skin layer. Melanin exists in a few different forms, ranging from soft reddish-brown varieties to deeper, almost black tones. Its most important role is protective. Melanin absorbs harmful ultraviolet radiation, converting that energy into harmless warmth instead of allowing it to damage sensitive cells. The more melanin present, the more sunlight is absorbed before it can penetrate deeper layers. This protective effect is one reason why melanin production increases after sun exposure. The skin responds by producing more pigment to shield itself, creating what appears to be a tan. Melanin is packaged into tiny granules and distributed through the upper layers of the skin. The number of granules, their size, and their placement all influence how much light is absorbed before reaching deeper tissues. This absorption shapes the visible tone of the skin. When melanin absorbs light, the remaining reflected light carries a slightly different balance of wavelengths, creating the final color perceived by the eye. This process is gentle and continuous, adjusting slowly over time as the skin responds to its environment. Beneath the melanin layer lies another contributor to skin color, hemoglobin. This molecule, carried within red blood cells, gives blood its distinctive color. The oxygen level in hemoglobin changes how it reflects light. When richly oxygenated, hemoglobin reflects more red and bright tones, giving the skin a warm, healthy glow. When oxygen levels decrease, the reflected color becomes slightly darker or more muted. This is why the skin can appear flush during exercise, when oxygen-rich blood flows near the surface, or cooler in tone when circulation slows. Small changes in blood flow beneath the skin add subtle shifts to overall color. Carotenoids also play a role. These pigments, obtained through diet, accumulate in the outermost layers of the skin over time. Carotenoids naturally reflect warm yellows and oranges, adding a gentle golden undertone to the skin. Foods like carrots, sweet potatoes, spinach, and other colorful fruits and vegetables contain carotenoids that slowly distribute through the body. While their effect on skin tone is softer than that of melanin or hemoglobin, they contribute to a slightly warmer overall appearance. Even small variations in diet can influence how noticeable these undertones become. Light itself shapes how skin appears because it does not simply bounce off the surface. It enters the skin, scatters through the various layers, and then exits. Different layers scatter light differently. The outermost layer, composed of dead skin cells packed closely together, scatters shorter wavelengths, giving a faintly bright and slightly blue cast in some conditions. Deeper layers scatter light differently, often reflecting more of the red and warm wavelengths from blood and tissues. The final colour seen at the surface is a blend of scattered light from these layers, combined with the absorption effects of melanin and carotenoids. This scattering explains why skin can appear different in various lighting conditions. In bright sunlight, the scattering from the outer layers is strong, making the skin appear lighter and more reflective. Indoors, with softer light, the deeper tones from melanin and hemoglobin become more visible. Under cool, bluish lighting, scattered blue wavelengths can shift the appearance subtly. Under warm lighting, the red tones from hemoglobin and carotenoids come forward. The chemistry of the skin stays the same, but the light guiding it changes the tint gently. Skin tones vary globally because of long histories of sunlight exposure. In regions where sunlight is intense throughout the year, higher levels of melanin provide essential protection against ultraviolet radiation. Over countless generations, populations living in these regions developed naturally deeper pigmentation. In regions with low sunlight, where ultraviolet light is weaker, the body benefits from allowing more light to penetrate the skin, supporting the production of essential nutrients like vitamin D. Over time, these environments shaped a broad spectrum of skin tones, each suited to its region's light conditions. These variations are not abrupt but flow gradually across the world, forming a gentle gradient rather than distinct categories. Human skin tones exist on a continuous spectrum, shaped by sunlight patterns, ancestry, and local environmental pressures. This diversity reflects adaptation rather than difference in structure. The chemistry is shared across all people. The same types of melanin, the same scattering of light, the same layers of skin, and the same underlying biology appear everywhere. Only the balance changes. Even within a single person, skin color shifts throughout life. Hormones can influence melanin production. Sunlight changes the balance of pigment. Age affects how light scatters through the layers. Temperature influences blood flow. When someone blushes, increased blood flow pushes warm tones to the surface. When the skin is cold, reduced circulation causes a cooler tint. Small chemical changes beneath the surface create temporary variations that are part of the skin's natural responsiveness. Hair, eyes, and nails also reflect related chemistry. Melanin shapes eye color with density and distribution, determining whether an eye appears brown, green, or blue. Hair color arises from the balance of eumelanin, which creates darker shades, and pheomelanin, which creates warmer reds and golds. Nails have a natural pink tone from hemoglobin beneath their surface. All of these features respond to light in similar ways because they share common pigments and structural properties. Understanding the chemistry behind skin coloration reveals how gently balanced the process is. No single molecule creates the full effect. Instead, melanin, hemoglobin, carotenoids, and light-scattering structures work together, each contributing a small piece to the overall tone. Skin color is not fixed but dynamic, responding to the world in subtle ways throughout each day. It is shaped by chemistry, by light, and by long histories of adaptation to the sun. Seen through this lens, human skin becomes a soft, layered, scientific story, a mixture of protection, reflection, and light. Its colours are created not by simple pigments, but by the quiet interplay of molecules in the environment, forming the gentle tones that connect all people through shared biology. Colour becomes meaningful only when it reaches the eye. Until that moment, colour is simply light interacting with matter. The moment it enters the eye, it becomes something personal, shaped by biology and perception. The human eye turns light into information through a delicate set of chemical reactions, each one triggered by the arrival of tiny packets of light. These reactions occur in photoreceptor cells, which sit in the thin, sensitive layer at the back of the eye. This layer, called the retina, is where colour vision begins. The retina contains two main types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. Rods are extremely sensitive to light but cannot detect colour. They allow you to see in dim environments, guiding vision at night or in low-light spaces. Cones, on the other hand, need brighter light to function, but are responsible for the colours you see. Each cone cell contains pigments that change shape when struck by a specific range of wavelengths. This shape change triggers a chemical cascade inside the cell, eventually sending a signal through the optic nerve toward the brain. There are three main types of cones, each tuned to a different part of the visible spectrum. One responds strongly to long wavelengths, another to medium wavelengths, and the third to shorter wavelengths. These correspond roughly to reds, greens, and blues, though the sensitivity ranges overlap. When light enters the eye, the balance of signals from these cones creates the impression of millions of colours. A single shade of green, for example, activates both medium and long wavelength cones in a specific ratio. A deep violet activates more of the short wavelength cones. The brain interprets these patterns as distinct colours, even though the eye only has three types of colour detectors. The pigments within cones are proteins attached to light-sensitive molecules. When a photon of the right wavelength strikes one of these molecules, it changes shape, setting off a chain of chemical reactions that alter the electrical state of the cell. This change sends a message that light has been detected. The reaction resets quickly, allowing the cell to respond to new light almost immediately. It is a cycle repeated constantly as the eye adjusts to changing scenes. Rods contain a different pigment that is extremely sensitive to low light. This pigment can detect even a few photons, which is why rods allow vision in darkness. However, rods become overwhelmed in bright light and take longer to adjust after a sudden change in brightness. This is why stepping into sunlight after being in a dark room can feel momentarily overwhelming. The rods need time to recover, while the cones begin to take over as the primary receptors. Colour blindness occurs when one or more types of cones are absent, altered, or less responsive. If the cones that detect medium wavelengths are affected, a person may find it difficult to distinguish between reds and greens because the brain no longer receives the correct balance of signals. If the cones responsible for short wavelengths are affected, blues and yellows may blend or appear muted. These variations are chemical at their root, caused by differences in the pigments inside the cones. Because the pigments are built from proteins, small genetic changes can alter their structure and shift their sensitivity. Some forms of colour blindness occur when two types of cones respond too similarly. If the medium and long wavelength cones overlap too much in their sensitivity, the eye struggles to differentiate reds from greens because the chemical responses inside the cones are too similar. Other forms occur when an entire cone type is missing. People with only two types of cones can still perceive many colours, but the range is narrower. The experience of colour remains rich, but the contrasts are different. Once cones and rods send their signals, the information travels through several layers of cells in the retina. Some cells compare signals from different cones to detect small differences in color. Others detect edges, brightness changes, or motion. The retina does much more than simply pass the light onward. It processes and organizes the signals, preparing them for interpretation. Only after this processing do the signals travel along the optic nerve to the brain. The brain then takes these signals and turns them into color. It does not simply reproduce what the eye has detected, it interprets, balances, and corrects the information. If the lighting is unusual, the brain adjusts the colors to match what it expects. If part of the image is missing or dim, the brain fills in details. Our perception of color is therefore partly based on chemistry and partly based on interpretation. Two people might look at the same scene and experience the colors differently because their eyes and brains respond in subtly unique ways. Light intensity also influences how colors appear. In low light, the cones become less active and the rods take over. Because rods do not detect color, the world appears washed out or grey in dim conditions. As light increases, the cones activate and color returns. This is why twilight has such a distinctive look. The balance between rods and cones shifts slowly as the light fades, creating a transition zone where colors appear muted and soft. The pigments inside our photoreceptors can become temporarily bleached in bright light. When this happens, the cells need time to reset before they can respond fully again. This is another reason why stepping from darkness into sunlight creates a moment of discomfort. The chemical cycle inside each receptor must restart. Once it does, color appears vivid again. Some animals have more types of cones than humans. Birds, reptiles, and many fish can detect ultraviolet wavelengths, giving them access to colors we cannot imagine. Others have fewer types, limiting their color perception. Humans sit somewhere in the middle, seeing a broad, rich palette thanks to the combination of 3 cone types and the brain's interpretive abilities. The chemistry inside the eye transforms light into perception with incredible efficiency. It does so continuously, without pause, adjusting moment by moment as lighting changes. Every color you see is the result of countless small reactions, each triggered by a passing photon. These reactions build patterns that the brain turns into the world you experience. In this sense, color is both physical and personal, created by light, shaped by chemistry, and completed by perception. Color becomes something far more intricate once it reaches the brain. Up until that moment, color is light meeting matter, waves being scattered or absorbed, pigment shaping what is left behind. But the instant the signals arrive in the brain, color begins to gather meaning. It is interpreted, labeled, linked with memories, shaped by experience, and infused with emotion. What you see on the outside becomes something felt on the inside, a quiet blend of biology and personal history. The visual information arriving from the eyes enters several regions of the brain at once. Some areas focus on identifying shapes and recognizing objects. Others focus on depth, movement, and contrast. And among these pathways sits the mechanism that gives color its emotional dimension. The brain does not treat color as a simple fact. It treats it as a cue, connecting each color with patterns formed throughout life. A soft blue may recall early mornings, quiet oceans, or painted walls from childhood. A warm red may remind someone of glowing embers, ripe fruit, or light through half-closed curtains at sunset. Each color carries associations, and those associations are stored not in the eyes but in the networks of memory. These patterns begin early in life. A baby learns to associate bright, warm colours with activity or attention, while cooler shades may become linked with calm moments or evening light. As the child grows, experiences add new layers. A favourite toy, a room painted in a certain shade, the colour of a favourite blanket, all become woven into the brain's expectations. The visual system continues collecting information, connecting colour with feelings, places and moments. Eventually, entire emotional responses can arise from a single shade. Cultural memory adds another dimension. Different societies assign different meanings to colours, and those meanings influence how individuals interpret what they see. A colour associated with celebration in one region may represent mourning in another. A shade that signals good fortune in one culture may signal caution elsewhere. These meanings are passed through stories, art, clothing, and traditions, becoming part of collective memory. The brain absorbs these cues without effort. Over time, the associations become natural, blending with personal experiences to shape emotional reactions. Warm colours often feel energizing because the brain links them with sources of heat and brightness. Sunlight at midday leans toward yellows. Firelight glows with reds and oranges. Fruits that signal ripeness often carry warm tones. These natural connections establish patterns that stay with the brain. Even artificial warm lighting can create a sense of vibrancy or comfort, because it taps into these long-standing associations. Seeing a warm colour may gently increase alertness, or evoke feelings of familiarity and closeness. Cool colours often feel calming because the brain associates them with shade, water, and sky. Blue light fades the world into softer tones during the evening. Lakes and oceans reflect gentle hues. Forests in deep shade carry quieter greens. These links form unconsciously, guiding emotional responses without needing direct thought. A cool colour can feel restful or serene because the brain ties it to moments of stillness. Even a cool-coloured room can seem naturally calm because the brain interprets its palette through associations built over a lifetime. Behind these feelings lies chemistry. When the brain interprets colour, it can influence the release of neurotransmitters, the chemicals that regulate emotion, attention, and relaxation. Warm colours may encourage tiny increases in arousal, nudging the brain toward alertness through subtle shifts in dopamine or norepinephrine levels. Cool colours may support the release of calming neurotransmitters, encouraging a softer, more restful state. These chemical changes are gentle, far from dramatic, but present enough to become noticeable over time. The brain's chemistry and colour perception work together quietly, influencing each other moment by moment. Memory pathways also play a role. The hippocampus, which supports memory formation, interacts with visual areas when familiar colours appear. If a certain shade has been linked with a positive memory, the brain may automatically shift toward a more relaxed or pleasant emotional state. If a colour is tied to a negative memory, it may trigger caution or discomfort. These reactions do not occur because of the colour itself, but because of the layered experiences attached to it. The colour becomes a symbol, activating memories and emotions held deep inside the mind. Even attention can be shaped by colour. The brain is naturally more sensitive to contrasts in brightness and hue, using these differences to organise visual scenes. Warm colours often stand out because they stimulate the visual system more strongly. Cool colours blend more easily into backgrounds, creating a sense of openness. Designers use these properties intentionally, but the brain discovered them first, long before modern techniques emerged. These preferences arise from the brain's attempts to interpret and prioritize information in the environment. Some emotional responses to color are nearly universal. Soft blues and greens are often seen as peaceful because they mirror elements common across landscapes. Warm reds and oranges often appear energizing because they resemble fire and sunlight. But even within these tendencies, personal history shapes reactions. One person may find comfort in a deep red because it reminds them of a familiar blanket. Another may find it overwhelming because it feels loud or intense. The eye detects the same wavelengths, but the brain interprets them differently, each perception colored by experience. Color can even influence memory. Studies show that objects viewed in certain colors are sometimes remembered more vividly than those viewed in neutral shades. Bright colors may offer stronger contrast, making details easier for the brain to store. Cool colors can support focus by reducing visual noise. Again, the chemistry behind these effects is subtle but persistent. The brain's networks adapt to the presence of color, strengthening or softening emotional and cognitive responses. Because of this rich interplay between color and experience, the brain treats color as a language. It reads color for clues, draws meaning from it, and uses it to predict what might happen next. A warm glow might signal comfort or energy. A dull, muted environment may cue the brain to relax. A bright or contrasting color might draw immediate attention. The emotional response arises not from the light itself, but from the neural pathways that interpret it. The meanings assigned to color continue to change as people encounter new experiences. A color once associated with childhood may take on new significance in adulthood. A shade linked with one event may shift in meaning when encountered in a new context. These interpretations remain fluid because the brain's networks remain open to new information. Color in this sense is not fixed but constantly evolving. Ultimately, the experience of color is a blend of biology, memory, and emotion. Light enters the eye, follows chemical pathways, and arrives in the brain as electrical signals. The brain then interprets those signals through stories it has gathered over years, stories built from culture, environment, and personal history. Each color becomes a quiet bridge between the physical world and the inner one, shaping feelings in small but steady ways. Through these layered interactions, color becomes more than something seen. It becomes something felt, remembered, and woven into the mind's private landscape. Long before chemistry had formal names or written symbols, early humans were already working with color. They learned it through touch, through curiosity, and through the slow discovery that some stones released beautiful powders when struck or ground. These powders could cling to skin, stain surfaces, or mix with fats and water to create something new. The earliest pigments came not from deliberate invention, but from a quiet partnership between humans and the earth, shaped by fire, stone, and observation. Each color carried its own story, and together they formed the beginnings of art. One of the first pigments used was charcoal, created simply by burning wood. Charcoal offered a deep black tone that could be applied easily. It came from fire, a familiar and comforting element, and required no complicated preparation. Alongside charcoal came ochres, soft, earthy pigments ranging from yellow to deep red. Ochres formed when iron-rich minerals weathered over long periods. Early humans discovered that these colourful earths could be collected, crushed and mixed with binders such as animal fat, plant sap or water. The resulting paints were durable and flexible, suitable for marking tools, colouring skins, or painting the walls of caves. These simple pigments helped early artists depict animals, figures, and symbols, leaving behind traces of their lives that still survive today. As people explored new landscapes, they encountered more minerals capable of producing colour. Malachite, with its rich green tone, appeared in areas where copper ores were exposed. This mineral could be ground into a fine powder and used for painting or decoration. Its preparation required more effort than ochre. The stone had to be crushed carefully, and the powder washed repeatedly to remove impurities. The result was a vivid green that seemed almost rare in the natural world. Early painters learned that different grinding techniques produced different textures, from smooth and soft to coarse and grainy. Blue proved more challenging. It appeared in the sky and in deep water, yet few minerals offered a stable blue pigment when ground. One of the earliest reliable blues was azurite, another copper mineral. Its colour varied from pale sky tones to deeper shades, depending on its purity and structure. Azurite was prized but not as precious as a pigment that would later define the history of colour: ultramarine. Ultramarine came from grinding lapis lazuli, a stone found primarily in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. This stone held a deep blue unlike any other, a blue so intense it became associated with the sacred and the divine. The preparation of a lapis lazuli into pigment was long and delicate. The stone had to be crushed, kneaded with wax and oil, then washed repeatedly with gentle alkali solutions. Only the finest particles, which separated slowly during washing, became the purest ultramarine. Because the process was lengthy, and the stone itself rare, ultramarine became one of the most valuable pigments in history. Entire trade routes developed around it. Artists reserved it for important subjects, often using it to colour the robes of revered figures. Its cost made it a symbol of devotion and craftsmanship. Other pigments carried hidden dangers. Cinnabar, the source of a striking red, contained mercury. When ground, it produced a brilliant pigment capable of lasting for centuries. Its colour was rich and warm, making it popular for ceremonial and decorative use. Though the people who used cinnabar may not have understood the full risks, they recognized that its preparation required care. Workers often avoided breathing the dust directly, and used simple protective measures when handling it. Lead-based pigments, such as lead white, became widespread later in history. Lead white produced a bright, opaque pigment prized for painting, cosmetics, and decoration. It formed through a controlled process involving lead sheets, vinegar vapours, and warmth. The resultant flakes were ground into powder and mixed with oils. The pigment was durable and smooth, but the same chemical properties that made it effective also made it toxic. Over long periods, exposure could harm the people who prepared or used it extensively. Still, lead white remained popular for centuries because no other white matched its coverage and purity. Arsenic-based pigments also appeared, offering colours that were striking but hazardous. Orpiment, a golden yellow with remarkable brilliance, came from arsenic sulfide. Realgar, a deep orange red, came from a related mineral. These pigments could be ground and used in artworks, but they were sensitive to light and air, and prolonged contact posed health risks. Artists handled them carefully, often storing them separately from other materials. Despite these challenges, the colours they provided were unlike anything else available at the time, giving artworks warmth and vibrancy. Not all ancient pigments were dangerous. Many came from gentle processes involving clay, minerals, or plant dyes. early people discovered that burning bones produced a strong black pigment called bone black. They learned that mixing different earths created new shades. Ochres could be heated to transform their colours, shifting yellows to reds or browns depending on temperature. Plant dyes, though less permanent, offered temporary washes of colour for fabrics, skins and objects. The knowledge of these colours was shared across generations, carried through tradition rather than theory. Fire played a role in pigment discovery as well. When minerals were heated, some changed colour or became easier to grind. Heating certain clays produced deeper tones. Heating copper minerals could yield new greens and blues. The transformation of materials through heat gave early humans insight into how colour responded to different conditions, even if the underlying chemistry remained unknown. Fire revealed possibilities, showing that colour was not fixed but could be shaped. Grinding stone became an essential method of pigment preparation. Carefully crushing minerals allowed the artists of the ancient world to experiment with consistency and purity. Some pigments required coarse grinding for textured effects. Others needed to be ground almost into dust for smooth application. Mortars and pestles became tools of creativity, helping early painters unlock the colours held within rocks. These pigments travelled across regions, carried along trade routes that connected distant cultures. Colour became part of storytelling and ritual. Ancient Egyptians used malachite and azurite to decorate tombs and statues. Greeks and Romans used cinnabar, lead white, and earth pigments in frescoes and pottery. Civilizations in Asia worked with rich mineral pigments, combining them with binders derived from plants and resins. Each culture adapted pigments to its own traditions, developing techniques that suited local materials and beliefs. The early chemistry of art was not formalized, but it was attentive. Artists learned which pigments faded in sunlight, which cracked when mixed with certain binders, and which blended harmoniously. Some pigments worked best with oils, others required egg yolk or natural glues. Through trial and observation, they built a working knowledge of colour that shaped the foundations of painting. Ancient pigments reveal a world where colour was precious. Stones were gathered with care. Powders were made slowly, washed and sifted repeatedly. Pigments were stored in shells, jars, or cloth pouches, protected from moisture and contamination. Even simple colours carried effort behind them, connecting the maker to the earth itself. Looking back at these origins, it becomes clear that early colour making was a quiet form of chemistry, grounded in observation and patience. It involved the transformation of stone to powder, the softening of minerals with water or oil, and the blending of pigments into new hues. These pigments tell stories, not only of the Earth's geology, but also of human curiosity. Through them, early artists learned to shape the world visually, giving rise to murals, decorations, and symbolic art that continues to inspire. The history of these pigments is a reminder that colour has always been deeply tied to the materials of the world, to soil, stone, fire, and water. The early chemistry of art was simple yet profound, turning the raw elements of the earth into tools of expression. Even today, many modern pigments owe their origins to these ancient discoveries, carrying echoes of the past into contemporary creativity. Modern colour chemistry has expanded the human palette, far beyond anything ancient artists could have imagined. For most of history, colours came from minerals, plants, or insects, each offering only a small range of tones. Many colours were rare, expensive, or unstable. Some faded easily or reacted with light and air. But with the rise of industrial chemistry, the world of colour opened dramatically. Today, Countless shades exist purely because chemists learned how to design molecules that absorb and reflect light with remarkable precision. The story of synthetic pigments began in the 19th century with a surprising accident. A young chemist working in a laboratory tried to create a medicine and instead produced a deep, vibrant, purple dye. This dye attached firmly to fabrics and resisted fading far better than most natural dyes. It became known as morphine and marked the beginning of a revolution. Instead of relying on crushed plants or rare minerals, chemists realized they could build color from scratch. The discovery encouraged others to explore the chemistry of color more deeply, leading to an explosion of new dyes during the 19th and 20th centuries. Designing synthetic dyes involves creating molecules with specific structures that absorb certain wavelengths of light. Chemists began mapping the relationship between molecular shape and color, learning how small changes could shift a dye from red to purple or from blue to green. At the heart of many dyes are long chains or rings of atoms that allow electrons to move freely. These electron pathways behave like tiny energy ladders. When light strikes the molecule, electrons move to higher positions, absorbing specific colors from the spectrum. The remaining wavelengths are reflected back, producing the color that the eye perceives. By adjusting the length of the electron pathway, or adding certain groups of atoms, chemists learn to shift the spectrum absorbed. This ability to adjust structure gave chemists extraordinary control. They could create molecules that absorbed narrow bands of light for pure, vivid color, or broader bands for softer tones. They could make dyes that attach strongly to fabrics, resisting water and sunlight, or dyes that dissolved easily for printing and inks. They learned to anchor dye molecules to fibers, creating stable colors that did not rub off. The science moved from simple discovery to deliberate design, and soon the market was filled with new shades that nature had never produced. Pigments for paints and plastics followed similar principles. These pigments are generally made from solid particles that reflect and absorb light, rather than from dissolved dyes. Early synthetic pigments gave artists new possibilities. Colors like synthetic ultramarine reproduced the beauty of natural lapis lazuli at a fraction of the cost. New reds and magentas offered hues with improved stability and brightness. Modern yellows and greens remained vivid in sunlight, resisting the fading that plagued many plant-based colors. Paints became more predictable, durable, and consistent, making them suitable for everything from fine art to industrial coatings. Inks benefited enormously from synthetic color chemistry. Printing required dyes and pigments that flowed smoothly, dried quickly, and resisted smudging. Early synthetic dyes made mass printing more practical. Over time, inks evolved into highly engineered mixtures that perform reliably across different surfaces. Chemists developed pigments for newspapers, books, packaging, and high-resolution digital printing. Today's inks can remain stable for years, resist moisture, and produce sharp edges thanks to carefully controlled pigment particles and binders. Plastic coloring also became essential in modern life. Synthetic pigments allowed manufacturers to add color to plastics during production, creating toys, containers, electronics, and countless other items with consistent, vivid tones. Because plastics can hold pigments differently from fabrics or paints, chemists developed pigments specifically suited to them. These pigments needed to be heat stable during manufacturing and resistant to breaking down under sunlight. Many of the colors seen in everyday plastic objects owe their existence to this specialized branch of color chemistry. Modern color chemistry, also created fluorescent and phosphorescent materials, capable of glowing under ultraviolet light or storing energy and releasing it slowly in the dark. These materials rely on molecules that can absorb high-energy light and then release it gradually. Glow-in-the-dark pigments, bright safety colors, and high-visibility paints all come from manipulating the way electrons move within molecules. These pigments did not exist naturally in stable, practical forms. Chemists built them deliberately to meet specific needs for safety, visibility, and decoration. Another area of growth involved pigments designed for stability in harsh environments. Automotive paints, for example, require pigments that can endure sunlight, moisture, and temperature changes for many years without fading. Industrial coatings need pigments that resist corrosion or reflect heat. Structural materials used in buildings and vehicles rely on pigments that do not degrade when exposed to the elements. Chemists created pigments with tightly bonded structures that resist chemical damage, ensuring that colors remain steady across time. The understanding of molecular design also led to environmentally safer pigments. Some early synthetic pigments contained heavy metals or other harmful substances. As awareness grew, chemists focused on creating safer alternatives. Modern pigments often use stable organic molecules or carefully engineered mineral structures that pose fewer risks to health or the environment. The field continues to evolve, with researchers exploring biodegradable dyes, plant-based molecules refined for stability, and pigments inspired by natural structures. Digital displays add another dimension to modern color. Screens do not use pigments at all. Instead, they rely on tiny light-emitting components, organic light emitters, liquid crystals, or semiconductor particles, each designed to emit specific colors when stimulated electrically. These technologies arise from advanced chemistry and materials science. The colors on a screen are produced by engineered structures that emit light directly, rather than reflecting it. This has opened an entirely new domain of color creation, where chemists and physicists work together to build molecules that glow with extraordinary purity and brightness. Another expansion in the modern palette comes from nanoparticles. These tiny particles interact with light in ways different from larger pigments. Gold nanoparticles, for example, appear red or purple depending on their size and shape. Silver nanoparticles can shift through a range of colors as well. These materials rely not only on chemical composition, but also on the physical arrangement of atoms. They are used in specialized inks, sensors, and coatings. Nanotechnology continues to reveal new color effects that were once impossible using conventional pigments. Textiles have also benefited from modern color chemistry. Synthetic dyes attach strongly to fibers like nylon, polyester, and acrylic, materials that did not exist historically. Each fiber type interacts differently with dyes. Chemists design dyes that match the chemical structure of the fabric, ensuring even coloring and long-lasting shades. Color-fast clothing owes much to these carefully engineered dyes, which maintain brightness through washing, sunlight exposure, and wear. Overall, modern color chemistry has created a world where almost any color imagined can be produced reliably. The spectrum available today is vastly broader than what nature provides. Synthetic pigments fill paint boxes, printing presses, clothing racks, digital screens, and everyday objects. They create stability, vividness, and variety that ancient pigments could not achieve. Yet the principles remain the same. Molecules absorb some wavelengths and reflect others, and careful design shapes the final effect. The expansion of colour in the modern world reflects both scientific discovery and human creativity. Chemists learn how to guide electrons within molecules, and artists use the results to express ideas. Engineers apply pigments to protect materials, and designers use them to evoke certain moods. The palette grows as science refines its tools, offering new colours that illuminate modern life, from the subtle shades of printed pages to the luminous displays that glow softly in the dark. Modern devices create colour in ways that can feel almost invisible from the outside. A screen looks smooth and continuous, glowing softly with images and scenes, yet each picture is built from thousands upon thousands of tiny points of light. These points sit so close together that the eye blends them effortlessly, turning separate colours into a single image. The way these devices generate colour relies on careful chemistry and precise control of light, all happening quietly inside objects used every day. Most screens use a combination of red, green, and blue light. Each pixel contains small elements that can glow in these three colours. By adjusting the brightness of each one, the device creates an enormous range of shades. When red and green glow together, the eye perceives yellow. When green and blue combine, they form cyan. When all three glow at full strength, the result appears white. The blending occurs in the brain, not on the surface of the screen, which is why individual points of colour are never noticed unless viewed extremely closely. The chemistry inside these glowing components determines how pure and stable the colours appear. Light-emitting diodes, or LEDs, serve as the foundation for many screens. An LED is a tiny structure made from carefully layered materials that release light when electricity passes through them. Inside the LED, electrons move from one layer to another, releasing energy as a small packet of light. The colour produced depends on the materials used in the layers. Certain combinations release red light, others produce green or blue. The chemistry behind these layers determines the wavelength of light created, allowing engineers to design LEDs that glow with exactly the colour needed. Organic LEDs used in many modern screens work similarly, but rely on carbon-based molecules instead of rigid semiconductor materials. When an electric current passes through an organic LED, the molecules release light as they return to their resting state. These molecules can be tuned through chemical design to emit specific colours. The result is remarkable flexibility. Screens can become thinner, more flexible, and richer in contrast because each pixel produces its own light without needing a separate backlight. The colour comes directly from the molecules responding to electrical energy. Lasers generate colour in an even more precise way. Instead of producing a range of wavelengths, a laser emits one very pure wavelength of light. This gives laser beams their distinctive intensity and clarity. Inside a laser, electrons move between carefully spaced energy levels within a material. When they drop from a higher level to a lower one, they release light at a very specific colour. If this light is reflected back and forth inside the device, it encourages more electrons to release light of the same kind, creating a stream of identical photons. This process produces a narrow, focused beam that remains consistent over long distances. The chemistry and structure of the laser material shape the final colour, whether it is red, green, blue, or something less common. Cameras also rely on colour chemistry, though in a different way. Instead of emitting light, they capture it. Each pixel on a camera sensor detects brightness, but not colour on its own. To gather colour information, tiny filters are placed over the pixels. These filters allow only certain wavelengths through. Some pixels receive only red light, others only green, and others only blue. When light strikes the sensor, each pixel measures how much of its particular color arrives. The camera then uses this pattern to reconstruct the full scene. The filters depend on dyes or thin films engineered to absorb specific wavelengths and transmit others. This design mimics, in a simplified form, the way cones in the human eye detect color. Different technologies use different approaches to control light. In liquid crystal displays, the screen contains a backlight that shines constantly, often using white LEDs. Tiny liquid crystals sit in front of this light, twisting in response to electrical signals. Their movement controls how much light passes through red, green, or blue filters. Each pixel adjusts its brightness based on how much the liquid crystal twists. The colors appear as these filtered beams combine. The chemistry of the liquid crystals ensures that they respond quickly and return to their original state reliably. Quantum dot technology offers another method for producing color. Quantum dots are extremely small particles, with sizes measured in billionths of a meter. These particles emit different colors depending on their size. Smaller dots emit blue light, slightly larger ones emit green, and even larger ones emit red. When illuminated by a backlight, each dot glows with a specific color. Because their emission is very pure, quantum dots can produce vivid, bright displays with strong contrast. The relationship between size and color arises from the physics and chemistry of electrons confined within tiny spaces. Light sensors in everyday devices also rely on chemical design. Smartphones, scanners, and even some household appliances use sensors that detect the color of incoming light. These sensors contain materials that change their electrical behavior when struck by specific wavelengths. By measuring these changes, the device can determine the color of the light. This ability supports features such as automatic brightness adjustment, color correction in photography, and even ambient light detection that guides screen warmth for comfort. Displays used in watches, calculators, and some instruments rely on pigments that respond to electrical signals. These pigments can change shape or orientation when stimulated, altering how they reflect or absorb light. The resulting colors can be muted or strong depending on the materials used. Although these technologies often produce simpler images than larger screens, the chemistry behind them still determines their appearance. Even everyday lighting uses color chemistry. LED bulbs in homes rely on mixtures of materials that emit different wavelengths. Some use a blue LED coated with a phosphor that converts part of the blue light into warm tones, creating a balanced white glow. Others combine red, green, and blue LEDs directly. The chemistry of the phosphors or the semiconductor layers shapes how the final light appears, whether cool or warm, bright or soft. Across all of these technologies, the principle remains constant. Color arises from electrons moving between energy levels, and from the way materials absorb and emit specific wavelengths. Engineers design these materials with extraordinary precision, controlling the light at scales too small to see. The result is a world filled with vivid screens, glowing indicators, bright signs, and cameras that capture color with remarkable accuracy. These technologies blend chemistry, physics, and careful engineering. Each pixel on a screen, each glowing diode, each laser beam, and each color filter works quietly but precisely. The colors that appear on phones, television, signs, and cameras begin with tiny structures that release or capture light in controlled ways. Through these small, ordered interactions, the familiar digital world becomes full of color. shaped by the gentle movements of electrons hidden deep inside modern devices. Colour stretches far beyond Earth, carrying its meanings and origins into the wider universe. When looking at the planets and stars, the colours seen through telescopes or spacecraft cameras arise from chemistry, light, temperature, and atmosphere working together on grand scales. Even though these worlds feel distant, the principles shaping their colours are the same ones at work in stones, leaves, flames, and skies here on Earth. The universe expresses itself through familiar rules, simply expanded into vast and peaceful forms. Mars appears reddish because of iron-rich dust spread across its surface. Over countless ages, tiny grains of iron minerals reacted with the thin Martian atmosphere, forming iron oxides. These oxides scatter sunlight in warm tones, creating the soft red colour that gives Mars its nickname. The dust hangs in the atmosphere, carried by winds that sweep across plains and over mountains. Even when storms rise, the colour remains, because the dust is so widespread that it tints the entire planet. The surface itself varies in shade, from deeper browns near volcanic regions to paler reds in the flatter plains. But the overall impression comes from this fine, powdery layer of oxidized iron. Neptune presents a striking contrast. Its deep blue tone arises from several factors working together. The atmosphere contains hydrogen, helium, and methane, and it is methane that plays a key role in shaping the colour. Methane absorbs red wavelengths strongly, allowing blue light to pass and scatter. This scattering creates a clear, vivid blue, similar to the way Earth's atmosphere scatters light, but with a stronger effect because of the composition. Neptune's atmosphere may also contain deeper cloud layers and high-altitude haze, which influence the final shade. The result is a blue that feels rich and calm, shaped by chemistry and distance from the Sun. Venus, wrapped in thick clouds, reflects sunlight through a veil of carbon dioxide, sulfuric acid droplets, and fine particulate matter. The clouds reflect a great deal of light, making Venus one of the brightest objects in the night sky. The reflected sunlight passes through layers of haze that give the planet a pale golden or creamy tone. This colour does not come from the surface, which is hidden beneath dense clouds, but from the interactions of sunlight with the atmospheric particles. The chemistry of the upper atmosphere shapes the final colour, making Venus appear soft and luminous. Jupiter and Saturn offer their own palettes. Jupiter displays bands of white, orange, brown, and deep red. These colours come from clouds made of ammonia, ammonium hydrosulfide, water ice, and deeper compounds whose exact compositions continue to be studied. Jupiter's atmosphere is layered, and each layer reflects and absorbs light differently. The movement of storms and winds mixes these layers, creating swirling patterns. Saturn, though more muted, carries gentle tones of cream, gold, and pale yellow. These arise from ammonia ice clouds layered over deeper haze. The colours are shaped by sunlight filtering through the atmosphere and by the chemistry of the gases and particles that float there. The colours of planets with atmospheres often result from how gases absorb and reflect specific wavelengths. Without an atmosphere, the colours depend on the composition of the surface. Mercury, for example, appears grey because of its rocky, heavily cratered surface. The Moon shares a similar tonality. Both bodies reflect sunlight directly from dusty, mineral-rich ground without atmospheric scattering to create softer shades. The light that reaches the eye is a blend of reflected wavelengths shaped by minerals, much like the colours of rocks and sands found on Earth. When moving farther outward, colour becomes even more varied. Nebulae, the vast clouds of gas and dust scattered across the galaxy, glow with colours created by excited atoms. When nearby stars emit strong ultraviolet radiation, atoms in the nebula absorb this energy and release it as visible light. Hydrogen often produces soft reds and pinks when its electrons drop back to lower energy states. Oxygen can release a gentle green or teal glow. Sulfur can add deeper reds. The result is a tapestry of colours shaped by the elements present, the temperature of the gas, and the energy of nearby stars. Though these colours may appear dramatic in photographs, they follow the same rules that govern a flame or a heated piece of metal, simply stretched across light years. Some nebulae do not glow through emission but through reflection. In these cases, dust grains scatter starlight. Blue light scatters more efficiently, giving reflection nebulae their familiar bluish appearance. This effect mirrors the scattering in Earth's sky, but on a scale so vast it can span many trillions of kilometers. These nebulae look serene, softly illuminated by the stars embedded within or around them. Star colors arise from temperature. Cooler stars glow in shades of red or orange. Warmer stars glow yellow or white. The hottest stars shine with a faint blue tone because they emit a greater amount of short-wavelength light. The same principle governs the color of heated metal, candle flames and light bulbs. A star's color also reveals clues about its composition. When starlight passes through outer layers of gas, certain wavelengths are absorbed by elements such as hydrogen, helium, sodium, or calcium. These absorption patterns do not change the overall color dramatically, but they allow astronomers to learn what the star is made of. Temperature determines the broad tone. Chemistry adds fine detail. Galaxies from a distance often appear whitish or pale because they contain billions of stars of different temperatures. Young hot stars contribute blue light. Older, cooler stars contribute red. The combination blends into a soft, diffuse glow. When galaxies interact or merge, bursts of star formation create pockets of bright blue where new hot stars ignite, while older regions remain warmer in tone. Colour becomes a map of both present conditions and ancient history. Even the light of distant quasars carries colour shaped by chemistry. Gas clouds between Earth and the distant object absorb specific wavelengths, creating subtle imprints. These patterns help astronomers understand how chemicals are distributed across the universe. Although these colours may not always be visible to the eye, they follow the same physical rules. Some cosmic objects display colours that arise from extreme conditions. Supernova remnants, for example, glow in multiple hues as shock waves heat gases and excite atoms. Planetary nebulae, formed when dying stars shed their outer layers, show rings and shells of colour shaped by temperature and chemical composition. The interactions of particles and energy produce a quiet radiance that reveals the structure of the expanding gas. Colour travels across the universe as a storyteller. It reveals temperature, chemistry, distance, and age. The reddish tone of a galaxy's light can even show how fast it is moving away, as the stretching of space shifts its light toward longer wavelengths. This red shift does not produce a vivid colour change to the eye, but it carries profound meaning to scientists, revealing the expansion of the universe. Despite the unimaginable distances, the principles remain familiar. When methane absorbs red light on Neptune, the effect mirrors the absorption that creates colours in leaves or pigments. When hydrogen glows red in a nebula, it follows the same rules that produce the colours of a flame. When stars vary from red to blue, They follow the same temperature-color relationship seen in heated iron. The scale is vast, but the chemistry is rooted in simple interactions between light and matter. As the journey moves outward toward the edges of the visible universe, color becomes a guide. It shows where gases glow, where stars burn hot, where planets reflect sunlight, and where galaxies drift. The universe may feel cold and distant, but its colors carry warmth, shaped by processes that echo across everything from a grain of dust to a giant star. Through these colors, the cosmos becomes gentle in its immensity, offering a quiet spectrum that stretches from the surfaces of nearby worlds to the glowing clouds that drift far beyond sight. Color has been woven through every part of this journey, from the smallest shifts inside atoms to the vast clouds of glowing gas stretched across the universe. And through all of it, the same quiet principle has been at work. Chemistry listens to light, interacts with it, shapes it, and releases it again in ways that fill the world with gentle variation. Nothing loud needs to happen for color to appear. A small movement of an electron, a slight bend in a molecule, a certain spacing within a crystal, or the softness of an atmosphere is enough to transform invisible energy into something the eye can rest upon. Understanding the chemistry behind color does not take away its wonder. If anything, it deepens it. A leaf changing from green to yellow becomes more than a seasonal moment. It becomes a shift in pigments responding to sunlight and temperature. The blue of the sky becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes countless air molecules scattering light in a quiet, continuous dance. The glow of a flame becomes more than warmth. It becomes atoms releasing energy in specific wavelengths shaped by temperature. Even distant planets take on new meaning when seen through this lens. Mars is red because iron dust oxidized over countless years. Neptune is blue because methane absorbs red light. Nebulae glow with soft clouds of color because gases release energy in gentle, predictable ways. Seeing color with this understanding is like looking at a familiar landscape and noticing details that were always present but never fully recognized. The world becomes layered. A flower becomes a collection of carefully arranged pigments that attract pollinators. A butterfly's wing becomes a mosaic of microscopic structures bending light. A sunset becomes the long path of sunlight through shifting air. Nothing loses its beauty. It simply becomes richer, more connected, more alive in its explanations. And even with all this knowledge, color retains its ability to reach inward. The chemistry delivers the light, but the meaning arises in the mind. Warm tones can still feel comforting. Cool tones can still feel calming. The entire spectrum can still settle the thoughts in small and restful ways. Color becomes a quiet reminder that the world is shaped by simple principles repeating across scales, from the tiniest particle to the edge of the cosmos. Thank you for drifting through this exploration tonight, and for spending these moments in a calm space of curiosity. Your presence here keeps this journey alive. If you have enjoyed this soft wander through chemistry and color, a like or a subscription would mean so much. To everyone who is already part of this channel, thank you deeply. Your support allows these peaceful explorations to continue, reaching new corners of science in a restful way. As the night settles a little more around you, feel free to let the last traces of the day loosen and drift away. Let the colors you've imagined fade gently into the quiet. Allow the mind to soften, knowing that everything from the glow of a candle to the blue of the morning sky follows simple, steady rules that never rush and never strain. May your thoughts slow, your breathing deepen, and your rest come easily, like light settling into calm shade. Sleep well.